Kind of combat training was very good for pushing Ronin to push himself as hard as he could. Even if it was a little too hard sometimes, like when Ronin used the lightning spear straight into the fire axe, finishing his combo by jumping off the main man's body and pulling out his two guns to shoot him 12 times, all just from out a barrel through and punch him into the ground because he jumped off the ground and had nowhere to dodge. A normal person probably couldn't barrel through that. Hell, Midoriya would be amazed if someone could stand after taking all that. So, the training wasn't perfect. At least he got to try some new tricks, ones that would be very helpful in the coming days even if he wasn't thinking of using them himself in a real fight. Adjust your grip area, even try and backquote. Mao towered over Midoriya as he pressed down, engaging with some wrestling basics. Yes, you're just don't heavy motherfucker. Midoriya spat out between breaths as he was practically pinned standing up. Mao stood in front of him, the two grabbing each other, with Midoriya unable to stop the bigger man from effortlessly lifting him up just like Sato, one of the exam F students. He had a problem where Sato could bull through his defenses and overpower him, picking him up without actually improving in any way, something Midoriya wanted to fix. An opponent the same size as Sato or bigger, or even just one stronger than Sato, could easily thwart such a simple tactic. But Midoriya's 5 feet 7 inches ass wasn't thwarting shit, especially against an opponent even bigger, heavier, and stronger than Sato. Midoriya had even put both legs against Mao's chest, trying to push off, but he literally was getting nowhere. Unable to even move an inch away from Mao as the main man stood fast. He smacked Mao's hands with his own, and while Mao wasn't that excited, it seemed laughing at Midoriya's flailing and failing was good enough to keep him fine and dandy. Seriously move, motherfucker. Midoriya strained his legs as hard as he could, but he couldn't get Mao to budge, leaving the main man standing as he held a squirming rat that was trying hard and failing harder. Don't you backquote struggle, move against backquote Dahan's backquote oh, look, I think you're getting it. Yee, just keep moving backquote to the left. Mao was smirking pretty hard as Midoriya tried to follow his advice, shimmying slightly. Really? Is this doing anything? Midoriya didn't feel any closer to getting out, and sure enough. Nope. Mao laughed harder, giving Midoriya a chance to escape as the big guy was distracted by his own laughter slipping out his Mao's grip loosened and landing on his ass. Not exactly an escape strategy he could hope to emulate in a real fight or use against Sato. Look, ya backquote ain't gonna be good at everything backquote. Das a fact. You need help with that backquote sheet. Just get somebody to backquote else stop backquote do that backquote sheet. Ah, I hate it when you're right. Midoriya stood up, rubbing his sore butt in annoyance both at the pain and the fact that he really couldn't learn a good method to do what he wanted on such short notice. He wanted to learn a good escape method he could practice on Sato, but in a real fight if he was grabbed he'd just stab whoever was dumb enough to grab him. That was a damn good escape strategy, worked every time on the streets, but it wasn't the kind of thing he could safely practice with Sato. The two wrapped their training up with the real final part of training, stretching, aka actual torture, and then headed out to get something to eat. Midoriya had 3 more days to try training each of the students, and it was probably best to work on what he could do and then worry about what he couldn't. And what he could do was, after figuring out what everyone wanted to do, force them to do something else. Yay tilde. So, today, we'll devote some of your time to movement, Midoriya told Exam F before they even started, meeting with all of them in the general gym to see all of them before they splintered off for self-study. The news was met with confusion and some groans, but Midoriya cared more about getting good results than being popular. One of the most important things about being a hero is getting to where someone needs a hero, and since none of you own a car, you're going to need to come up with your own forms of getting around. Midoriya had reflected on what he was going to try to teach everyone, and this was one of the planned points he planned to do it on the last day, but since he needed a little more time to come up with better regiments for Sato and Kirishima as well as let Kaminari heal a bit more, he might as well do it early to stall for time. Now, this isn't the end all be all, but a hero with high mobility can get to disasters and crimes faster, save more people more quickly, and is generally better than a hero who's so slow they only show up once everything's over. In reflecting, Midoriya had thought over his own movement methods, both preemptive and in the moment. Preemptively, Midoriya tried to be in areas of crime to be as close as possible so he wouldn't need to travel far, cutting down travel time so he could arrive on the scene ASAP, but that would be something they'd learn when they started to learn about hero patrols and patrol routes. This was more similar to his parkour and previous usage of Yamato. Speaking of Yamato, you'll find that each of you might have different areas of movement you excel at, and I'd recommend you play into your strengths before trying to play against your weaknesses. He stared at Zero for that one, the hero student with tape powers who would be great in any area with tall buildings but terrible in any place with no structures for him to latch onto. It reminded him of Yamato. He had gotten so used to the sewers, a labyrinth of messy tunnels chaotically cutting into each other because Yamato allowed him to bypass a mess, meaning he could get places faster and lose anyone following him easily. Without Yamato, Ronin used the sewers much less. He couldn't see crimes as easily while traveling through. It wasn't direct, and it didn't play well with the climbing and parkour skills he'd been honing. This is the only day we'll be doing this, and you don't need to do it all day. But Midoriya locked his gaze onto each student at a time, turning his head so they could see and feel his focus on them even with the bandana over his eyes. I encourage each and every one of you think about how you move, how you fight, and how those two come together. Bakugo, you're with me. Kirishima, you're next, be ready. The rest of you, get thinking and get going. Dismissed. Bakugo's training went smoothly as always. The blonde bomber had an instinctive understanding with just a small lead. They started with a simple chase, to give Bakugo an idea of what Ronin was talking about with Bakugo excelling in the outdoor area, but having more difficulty anytime the quarters got tighter. He couldn't fly as hard and risk damaging the surroundings even if the villain damaged them already or risk causing a collapse, a mistake he made once, and only once. With that sorted, Bakugo practiced switching from moving to fighting and back again. A great combo was flying with his explosions warmed up his hands, letting him create bigger explosions, and creating bigger explosions in fights in turn helped him to create bigger explosions while he was flying so he could move faster. Once again, he was everything Ronin could ask for. Kirishima was a little tougher, having always been bad at movement and mobility. He was stiff, pun partially intended. He didn't have the out-of-the-box thinking to majorly change his movement style. You'll never catch up if you're just going to take the obvious path. Ronin warned from atop a building with just one level, a mere 4 feet above Kirishima but unreachable as Kirishima couldn't copy his parkour moves. He jumped off the opposite wall, grabbed the ledge, and then pulled himself up but Kirishima couldn't even copy the wall kick, let alone reach the ledge from the ground, his hand wildly scraping at the wall and leaving a nice scratch but no traction. I'm trying. Kirishima, to his credit, was trying. He kicked off the wall of the single-level building, but even with that, he couldn't reach the ledge. He tried to copy Ronin's wall kick again, but without a muscle bodysuit, magic gauntlets and boots, he couldn't even reach the other wall to kick between the two. Don't try copying me, you can't. Ronin was stopped patiently, not even trying to run as he thought through this problem. Kirishima's big problem all came back to one thing: he was as creative as a box of rocks. Mao might have been able to turn super durability into a weapon that he regularly used to beat Midoriya and the Yakuza's asses anytime he fought them, but it was because he didn't just stand around and take punches. He was a good runner. He worked out. He had a motorcycle in case he was in a hurry. He learned martial arts, and even weaponized his enhanced body by attacking with his extremely durable limbs. With hands as tough as his punch was like getting hit with a hammer. On the other hand, Kirishima, well, he could walk toward danger at least. You need to think of an approach that fits you. It doesn't even have to be with your quirk. Just think of what you're good at, and try to apply it to this. I didn't practice running and jumping though. Kirishima grimaced as he looked up at what he thought might be his hardest and lamest challenge. He had a gap of just 4 feet, 9 feet if you counted the rest of the wall below it. Quote. Well, what have you been practicing every day? Getting Kirishima to start thinking outside the box would clearly be a challenge, and even trying to find a place to start was as hard a challenge for Ronin as getting up this ledge was for Kirishima. Taking hits, lifting weights, some endurance workouts. Kirishima counted it off on his fingers, giving Ronin not much to work with. Well, Kirishima could break walls with his hands, showing that his hands were hard and he had good muscle. Was there any way to expand on that? Quote. Can you do a pull-up? Quote. Yeah. Quote. Can you grab the wall? With Kirishima giving him so little to work with, Revenant decided that perhaps he would have to have Kirishima copy him, partially at least. Under careful instruction, Kirishima put his hands against the wall, then grabbed the rough contours his own hard skin, getting some good traction against the wall until Kirishima tried to pull himself up on Revenant's direction, getting a small ways up until his weight pulled him too far away from the wall, making him lose grip. Second try, Kirishima did a little worse, trying to leap onto the wall and grab it there, his hard hands scraping and scratching the wall, but not getting the grip. You are allowed to damage the wall, Kirishima. Grab the wall, embed your hands, then go up and do it all over again. Revenant tried his best to walk Kirishima through it, and with proper guidance, he could see the results metaphorically and literally as Kirishima slowly ascended the wall. It was progress, even if Revenant had to think of it himself. He rubbed his head, sighing, then focused less on the problems and more on the work ahead. Good, Kirishima. 4 feet to climb and it took you. Midoriya checked his timer, doing some rough math. 40 seconds. I think we can get that time down, don't you? Kirishima was the hardest pun once again intended, but it still wasn't easy past that. Zero and Mina both were good in the streets in fairly different ways, with large overhanging structures and sharp twisting paths respectively. Zero had trouble with empty spaces, anywhere he couldn't swing on a massive structure. Mina's movement depended drastically on the terrain, being great on most surfaces but coming to a crashing halt anytime she met her old enemy. Stairs. Sato was, luckily, a repeat case of Kirishima. Even if he couldn't dig his hands into the wall like Kirishima, his enhanced grip strength let him grab the wall without damaging it, and with his enhanced leg strength, he could even jump greater heights and run faster, meaning he was actually edging out in the mobility department, only slowed down by his own lack of skill at running, showing it wasn't something he regularly practiced. And, of course, the last hurdle was Kaminari better running than the rest because he had been forced to practice it, but without using his quirk still slower than Mina's slide, Bakugo's flying, or Zero's swinging. Still, his well-developed basics gave him a great platform to build off of, and to return to a very old activity. Kaminari's brow was damp with sweat from effort and heat as his body sparked, concentrating very hard on his legs. Bits of electricity radiated out from his legs as he walked, using his quirk to move his legs at speeds much faster than normal and a little faster than Kaminari could normally control. It was hard to just walk in a straight line without accidentally teetering off to one side. Keep correcting your gait, Kaminari. Don't focus on me, focus on the terrain. Look where you're going. Ronin oversaw Kaminari's training, standing atop a building to watch, far enough away to serve as a difficult goal Kaminari would have to try to reach, but close enough to intervene almost immediately if something went wrong. Walking in a straight line was something Kaminari had practiced tons before, he just wasn't that good at it still. If he had been good, when he lost control over his emotions and rushed Ronin, he would have actually hit a couple of times instead of running straight past. So, now, it wasn't a matter of doing it. Kaminari could cover his legs in electricity and do the super move with little effort, but he just couldn't actually aim it yet. So, Ronin took a trial by fire approach. Relatively. They stood in the movement training center because the ground and buildings were soft, meaning Kaminari could crash all he liked, but instead of just doing a straight line, Ronin threw out more complicated problems. Stairs to climb up, corners to round, things to jump over. He hoped that by forcing Kaminari to work on some more advanced moves, the blonde bolt's basics would improve even if calling turning and jumping advanced moves nearly made Midoriya facepalm, but it was what it was. As the day wound down, Kaminari had practiced almost every basic moving situation Ronin thought he'd realistically needed in, but even so, that wasn't enough, and so Ronin ended the day with a quick talk to all of Exam F1 final time. Alright, I'll get out of your hair in a second, he said as he rounded them up from around Gym Gamma, where many of the students intended to spend some extra time to further their development. Even as he focused on Exam F, some of the other students turned their gaze toward him, listening in as he closed out the day's training. But first, feedback. Does anyone have any questions? Comments? Concerns? Climbing sucks Tilda. Fuck you say, sugar addict. Spiky hair. Kirishima and Sato both lamented their training, focused on an entire area they hardly ever developed before, while Bakugo bit back to defend his hobby. Good to see that Bakugo was still into rough climbing. Midoriya guessed. Didn't really matter to him as the blonde bomber trotted both of them, ready to show them what good climbing really looked like. Climbing. Nah, Kirishima. Mina shook her head at Kirishima and Sato as if she, the second dumbest in 1A, knew what was really going on. She stood side by side with Kaminari, the true dumbest in 1A, as they shook their heads and then gave a tired smile while speaking together. Stairs suck. Well, everyone has their own problems, Ronin muttered mostly to himself as the students argued over who had it the worst, with Zero and Bakugo on the side making everything worse, one for his own enjoyment and one because of his overwhelming passion and pride. But if you don't have anything else, you might have noticed you all experienced a variety of problems today, including some situations outside of your normal wheelhouse. Ronin paced slightly, looking at each of the students as he spoke to try and establish a firmer connection in their heads. Tight corridors, high obstacles, rough terrain, all of these things aren't what you should normally deal with in the field, and all of these things can be avoided if you carefully pick what kind of work you'll accept when you're a hero. Not everything you did today will apply to your hero career. There might even be some things that you might only have to face a few times in your life, and even then, you won't have to go through them. But the provisional license exam isn't something you'll experience often. Ronin stepped back, now talking to all of Exam F in a clear-cut but loud voice, addressing all of them simultaneously to help them see the bigger problem. The provisional license exam isn't designed to work like a normal day of professional heroism. It's designed to push you to your limits, to put you through as tough a situation as possible. It generally combines combat and rescue elements into one space to push you to both extremes of heroism. Midoriya was unsure how many of the students studied past provisional license exams, but last year had a small army of robots posing as civilians and a barely smaller army of similar robots as terrorists, forcing the examinees to have to battle the terrorists while protecting the very similar-looking civilians, with the terrorists even deliberately being mixed in with the civilians. You might think you'll hardly ever use these movement skills, and you might be right, but the provisional license exam is designed to stimulate exactly that. The worst of the worst, the toughest days you'll face, and it's designed to bring out every single thing about you to show just how good of a hero you are when the chips are down. That's why your combat must be top-notch, and why I want your movement to be up to scratch. Ronin wasn't sure they'd get what he was saying, but he had to make a point, so he had to bring up some tough times. If you want to be professional heroes, you'll need to be ready to deal with the next Hell Night. The Camino Ward incident, just its name, made most of the students shiver at the memory, watching their idol All Might battle it out all over the news as monsters rose up from underground laboratories to wreak havoc on the city. It truly was an event that pushed every hero that was involved to their limits, and Ronin would know. Even his incredible pain tolerance got pushed to its limit when he nearly blacked out and died in a single hit from that weird female Nomu just seconds before the fight finished. So, whenever you think the training is tough, whenever you're pushed to your limits and can't go on, remember the threats you'll have to face. Ronin pulled them out of the memories of that night with his loud voice, even as a few couldn't help but turn and look at the diminished form of All Might as he stood a small ways away, watching them back in return. In fact, almost all of the students were at this point. It's better to find your limits here than in the field, so push hard. Give it your all. The provisional license exam is tough, but it's not impossible. It's designed to be beaten, and your trainings are designed to make sure you beat it. Now is the part Midoriya struggled with, the motivational stuff. A little unsure how to hype them up while keeping them cautious, Midoriya decided he'd lean more heavily on the warnings than the hype. Wasn't his thing anyway. That's why you need to train even the things you're bad at, your movement skills, your close combat, your long-range combat, hell, even your people skills. Communicating as a team can be crucial. We only have 2 more days together, so we'll push harder on pushing your limits. If anyone has something specific they want to work on, come see me when you get the chance. Ronin, or more accurately Midoriya, was a little upset. This was all he could do for them. Ironically, because UA was a good school, they didn't have the time he'd like to whip them into shape. They had to study for exams, do homework, and actually try in class. Midoriya had been done with all his schoolwork for the year for months, leaving him to spend his days as he pleased and work on himself as much as he'd like. But that wasn't something he could deal with. With that said, you all have been doing well. I've seen big improvements since the training camp, and I hope to see more in these last 2 days. Don't think they'll let you slack off because the end is approaching. Ronin couldn't miss his exam. Expressions shifted from worry to determination, even smiling and sharing some jokes with each other. Not really his thing, but if they wanted to come together and work together, it'd probably be for the best. Keep thinking about how you want to improve the heroes you want to become and keep striving to become those heroes. Now, dismissed. Sir. Sensei. Damn right, teach backquote. There was an air of excitement in Gym Gamma as the students decided that maybe they could stay just a bit longer, maybe train a bit harder, to their teacher's approval like Midnight, who stepped out for 5 minutes to get some more drinks and had no idea why everyone was so excited but was happy to see it. Morale is up, the motivation is high, and the activity buzz is strong, a great atmosphere for a training gym. Ronin didn't stick around to see it. Today was a hunting day, and he wanted to get to it. He adjusted the bag on his shoulder, making his way out until he bumped into his favorite principal, at least compared to Aldera's principal, the fluffy football himself. Ronin glanced back at the group one final time, shrugging. The motivation is nice, but will it be enough? I can't teach them enough to ensure it. Still, Ronin wished he was able to push Sato a little further in their wrestling. Push all of them, in fact. Ronin had a niche that he filled neatly, a small, high-speed opponent. His strength wasn't his main point, it was his speed, even if the bodysuit did put him into the upper limits of what a human could do and near the level of some weak strength enhancing quirks. If he could find a big guy to help him, he could force them to develop in new ways against an opponent they realistically would have to face. Almost every Nomu Ronin had ever fought was more of a big strong than a small fast type, and even the fastest ones were well bigger than him. Just dealing with a heavy, strong, and large opponent could help them develop a lot. Maybe there was a teacher at UA he could use, or a robot. No, Vlad King was the teacher of 1B, so he'd be busy. All Might was all retired, Eraserhead was the same type as Ronin, Midnight was too niche, same for present Mike. Maybe he could just do a big robot. But then he'd need someone like Nezu there the whole time to operate the robot, and Nezu had a history of going a little too far, like Kaminari and Mina's midterm exam. You've done fairly well with what you have, even if they won't have their ultimate moves Tilda. Principal Nezu gave him a cheeky smile, showing he didn't really care about the ultimate moves, just reminding Ronin that he couldn't teach everything. But I suppose if they really want those flashy moves, they'll have to develop them on their own. The gym's open all day, after all. There was exam F. No, 1A's biggest weakness, their horrible self-study habits, or rather, lack of them. Only Bakugo was shown to train on his own, but he was always training, leaving no question of why he was the strongest. Ronin could only hope that his words would reach them and that they wouldn't just stick around the gym for a few minutes, but a few hours, putting in the time for some real development. Still. UHP. Nezu was quick to shut down Ronin before he could warn his limits, shaking a finger at him. As a teacher, you have to know your limits just like the students have to find theirs. There are some things that you can help them with, but there comes a point when they must trek on themselves. It was kind of similar to what Mao had told him, pointing out to the young vigilante that of course he couldn't teach the kids everything, as even Ronin couldn't do everything. He didn't like it, but facts were facts. So, he'd have to work around them. Tomorrow you're planning for more combat training. Midoriya didn't fully understand why Nezu was wasting time asking about stuff like that. The pair had already gone over a rough idea of the plan for the week, but then again, Midoriya was wanting some help, so maybe the plan was changing a bit. The plan is still on track so far, but I want them to train against a variety of opponents. If this keeps up and they only fight me, they won't be prepared to fight tough challenges or face a variety of opponents, they'll just be prepared to fight self-destructive vigilantes with too many gimmicks. And you have someone in mind to help. Nezu spoke in a sing-songy voice, eager to lend UA his aid if possible, of course. We do have many staff busy right now with many important tests right now. Class 1B, 2A, and 2B have their provisional 2 and 3A and 3B are setting up for internships and apprenticeships, but I'm sure one of the third-year teachers could spare a day if you ask Tilda. We'll see. Midoriya's tone was a little less hostile and a little more jovial as he made his small list of requests, both because he was getting to help, and because he was getting to do something fun in his eyes in just a few hours. Quote. And if that's all impossible, I could probably do something with hopefully, just one robot per student. Well, it shouldn't be impossible, but I guess only time will tell Tilda. Nezu smiled up at Midoriya as they reached the front gate, but he was determined to hell and back not to let it come to that final option. He wanted to see something fun. He'd seen thousands of those robots get smashed up, and he wanted something exciting. It was that longing for excitement that got in the way of his rational thinking, but as something had gotten in the way of him thinking rationally, he didn't notice. Then I'll see you tomorrow, same time as always. Midoriya exchanged polite partings, turning to leave through UA's front entrance as he walked out slowly. Then slower, until Ronin. Quote. Ronin came to a gradual stop, as his mind gradually sped up. He did have some plans, but, quote. We've helped each other out quite a few times, haven't we? Quote. We have. Nezu answered as slowly as Ronin spoke, his head cocked as he tried to piece together what Ronin had planned. The noticeable change in Ronin's posture, the slight switch of tone, he was thinking something. Quote. I was wondering. Ronin glanced over his shoulder, his bag swaying slightly with emotion as he looked back at the furry fucker for something he probably should have thought to do earlier. Quote. Off the record, do you know of any crimes going on? Anything that needs an extra hand? Now, Ronin just intended to maybe pick up a few hints towards a crime spree, or maybe some tips of where a villain or two was just to give him something to do as he discussed with Mao. He already had plans that night, but those plans wouldn't last all night. Besides, Nezu was head of a hero school, with the former number 1 hero on his payroll and every single one of his other teachers still being an active hero. Surely the rat dog raccoon bastard had a few tips he might give out. And hey ha Tilda. Quote. Why are you laughing? It wasn't a coincidence that Revenant came out as if this was an actual crisis, as he realized asking the furry fucker about this might have been a mistake. Chapter end notes. Yo, that was long taking than intended. Usually, when one of these takes a while, it's because of gaps. These days you have long stretches when I don't work on the chapter. This was long just because I was trying to get a good flow and had to cut a lot of stuff because I'm trying not to focus on fluff and keep it to the interesting bits, and only using the bits that build up or lead into better things. While I like exam F and would like to talk about how each one of them is doing and improving, I'm trying to keep it down for the sake of brevity even though I really want to delve more into Sato, Mina, and Zero. They're not that important overall, so I'm trying to focus my attention on the more important things and just keeping them relevant even if they're just in the background RN. Other news, halfway through the training, and we're finally starting to really develop the next arc beyond just Midoriya crashing into and seeking out the Yakuza on his own. Not that he's going to stop, mind you. Just as a quick overview, man, I love everyone in exam F. But man, some of these kids are hard to work around. I can see why Sato has only 2 super moves in canon. One is just him activating his power by eating a lot of sugar and punching wildly, and the other is just him activating his power by eating a lot of sugar and a straight punch. The creativity on display would get outclassed by ChatGPT, but he doesn't have much to work with. Even if it's a very similar case for Kirishima. They're not great thinkers, those exam F kids. Which might be why they're called exam F. Man, we'll all hope they'll change their name if they become a full hero team. But that's that. Thanks for reading and sticking around, but for now, adios. I just filled in for a night shift for a week, really messing with my sleep schedule but giving me a lot of time to work on this. Still no editor, but they're busy with this weird thing called life, but I've never had one and barely know what it is, so that can't stop me. Until next time, amigos, adios. Chapter 229, Duncan backquote on druggies. Chapter summary. Ronin and Mao finally get to trash a drug lab. Chapter notes, see the end of the chapter for notes. She tilde T, man, you hero backquote. Was good, ma backquote man tilde. Outside the golf course the two men met, Mao riding up on his chopper with a big smile and Midoriya relaxing in casual clothes. They'd switch into their uniforms somewhere along the way to be a little discreet, but first. Fighting's good, big man. Got so much coming in, you'd think it was a martial arts tournament. Midoriya responded to the big man's big greeting with a nod as he sat outside the mini golf building, sifting through the printed papers Nezu had lent him. They read some interesting things, especially if they were true, and why wouldn't they be? Turns out my teaching idea wasn't so stupid. Check this shit out. Man, having other people do research for you feels great. Midoriya couldn't help smirking as he raised the papers up to show the main man under an hour ago. Midoriya had been teaching class 1A, but as he left he caught Nezu. Instead of blowing the furball off like normal, he decided to do something he hadn't dared to try until today. He asked the furball about any ongoing big crimes. After all, if UA's principal trusted him with students, why wouldn't that principal trust him with a few crime reports? Mao took the top paper, checking it out, then took a second one, then flipped them over to see both papers had backs. Sheet, man, this is a floor plan and this sheet's detailed as sheet tilde. You got stuff like this? Not unless I broke into City Archive. Midoriya tapped the papers against his leg, setting them all straight. The papers were the information they had so far on the Shihasakai same Yakuza Midoriya and Mao had been terrorizing. He heard we were terrorizing these guys, and it turns out, there's an active investigation into them already. They already some information on them, and since I'm helping out the school. Sheet, you work in backquote a good angle dear, Senpiter. It was hard to tell what impressed Mao so much the big man was just looking at some floor plans. Midoriya figured they'd be useful for going in and clearing the place, maybe planning a route, but Mao put way more interest into them than Midoriya did. Was it a difference in experience? This ain't no warehouse I've ever seen. Thought class backquote rooms, all as small as Yudek. This sheet ain't that place we sweep in backquote tonight, is it? No, this is a future project, Midoriya said, skipping over Mao's interesting vocabulary as he gave the main man a few more papers, details on the place in question. Apparently, in a few weeks, the Hero Association is trying to smash the head of the Yakuza. Apparently, this is the head's place and ancestral home, I think, really old-fashioned. Don't know why they need so much time to arrest the head if they know where he is, but apparently, Nezu's willing to try and get me on the task force. I could ask about a +1 if you're interested. And backquote work with heroes. I'm crazy, not stupid like your dumbass. Mao got a chuckle out of the papers, but he passed them back. Just like Midoriya thought, the main man wasn't interested. I've got plenty of fun with my current gig. And speaking backquote of which tilde. Right, get your GPS out. Midoriya passed Mao the saved coordinates currently in active business, a shopping mall on the outskirts of town. It had been kind of fishy and on Midoriya's radar for a while. He raided so many places, but almost all had at least one receipt from this place. He only realized it by accident. He had a habit of grabbing important papers and taking pictures of them, leaving the physical copies for the police. During that, he started noticing this one food store had receipts in the background of almost every picture. There was a fuck ton of them, across 7 dens, with some being over an hour from that store. Now, that alone wasn't concrete. Midoriya figured the store was just near the drug production place. Then he investigated the place himself, and after sitting on a rooftop for 3 hours, he saw something interesting: a delivery driver with a broken arm. More specifically, it was interesting, cause he broke that guy's arm just days ago. He hadn't been able to bag him because that guy played dead, and while Ronin focused on other criminals, that guy slipped out. Midoriya wasn't sure why you'd have a guy with a broken arm to drive. That didn't feel safe, but it was another lead in a small stream that gave Midoriya a solid idea that this place was shady, especially when he used the internet to reach out to other vigilantes and get a few other opinions that gradually turned this crackpot theory into something concrete. It's not great, so we start casual, walking through the back when we see a truck in, investigate the stuff, and if it's drugs, boom. That's my plan. If she was Anna backquote simpler, I would've thought it up my backquote self. Mao laughed at the simplistic but ultimately reasonable approach. It wasn't like Midoriya had a huge force of investigators like the heroes, collecting building plans and even history on targets. He just spent a week poking around this place, ultimately coming to the conclusion that this seemed to be the distribution point for the drugs to the warehouses, meaning either they were shipped from overseas to here, or there was a lab here. Speaking of labs, any idea what kind of kid we're dealing with? They've got guns, at least. Another big reason the store was suspicious, a few locals had seen workers with guns around this place. Not a lot, but getting guns in Japan legally was hard as fuck, and there was no way to justify having guns to guard some store's frozen vegetables. It was supposed to be a food store, not a jeweler, so what was so valuable that the workers would carry guns? I think it's supposed to be a secret. Locals don't see them much, but a few homeless people in the area have. Luckily, these guys are like the rest we've dealt with. Dare dumber than me. Mao laughed as they rode his bike to a midpoint, stopping to switch uniforms and rides in an underpass. They switched from Mao's usual chopper to a bike Mao had and chained in place in advance, hopping rides then drifting towards the mall. Dumb people are dumbmost backquote fun top backquote fight nothing's more dangerous than an idiot with backquote a gun. Guess I backquote be talking backquote dull lead. Didn't I beat you by shooting you? Proof of how dangerous idiots with guns are tilde. Fuck off. Hey, Mao pulled up 2 blocks from the mall, riding into an alley and killing the engine. Long as I know what backquote I'm getting into, I should be Gucci, fam. Don't worry. Should. Midoriya had to take a few extra seconds to get everything off the bike and onto his person, ending by taking his helmet off and adjusting the wig underneath to at least try being a little stealthy. He rolled down his jacket's large sleeves, covering the metal gauntlets. He even brought the stupid umbrella attachment to cover his sword. It hardly did a thing. It was almost 100 degrees out, but no harm in trying. Mao's disguise was a lot more casual, and therefore, better. He had already shapeshifted into his mock Midoriya with incredibly pale skin and still white hair. He wore his usual outfit of baggy pants, some solid boots, and a new piece of equipment on his torso, still no shirt. He tucked his mask and cannabis pieces underneath his newest piece of equipment, a long-tailed vest, made of several pieces of leather with spots to hold his mask, cannabis, and even some guns that were big and baggy even on the main man. You sure this vest is supposed to be this loose? You'll just stitch the vest when you get enough hype. It better be loose enough. How's it feel? After a long time of measuring, adjusting, and working, it was finished the prototype of Mao's new vest. This one wasn't made out of metal muscle, but it did have some muscle included in the design. It was basically a long, sleeveless version of Midoriya's usual jacket, down to having a ton of pockets to hold things on the inside like Mao's mask. Mao worked his arms, checking the tail of the coat. He practiced by throwing out a few kicks, the coat tail slowing a moment behind his legs as they were pulled along. Could be a little backquote shorter. I'll make IH backquote work. The pair made their way out from under the little bridge, moving the motorcycle to one side, then kept walking towards their target, a bland-looking 2-story building with pictures of food plastered on the front. It had metal shutters and bars over the windows. It fit in well between the rougher side of town. It was closed while still remaining decent looking for the nicer area it stayed in. Around the back was a bay that trucks would pull into with 2 big bay doors, and the ground sloping downwards to the back of the truck would line up with one of the bay doors and a door into the building. There was already a truck pulled into one, so all we have to do is wait for another truck to pull in. My reports say it'll be here in an hour. Ish. The drivers aren't that consistent, but hey, where are you going? Wait and stupid. We're gonna do it kinda your way with these disguises, but I'ma do your way my way, Mao explained as he walked straight towards the back of the building with a shrug and a confident grin. Go in, find lab, beat that shit out of everyone. That doesn't make any sense, and do you think they'd be stupid enough to put their lab near an entrance? Tots and lobsetters was. Well, that's why they're gone. We just need to wait for them to load a truck and oh goddammit. Midoriya realized that Mao's quirk must have made him immune to common sense, and unfortunately, it was probably better to try brute forcing his way in with Mao than to try his plan with Mao actively getting in the way, the nuances of working with someone who just wanted to fight. The two approached the back entrance, Midoriya keeping a careful eye out while Mao walked forward like he owned the place. Midoriya could make out no one in the truck, but there was a camera directly over one of the bay doors to look over almost all the area. If he had his preference, he would have moved in putting the truck between him and that camera to at least be more hidden, but with Mao walking in like he was $1,000,000, that felt a little pointless. It wasn't quiet, between the buzz of the AC unit mixing with the cicadas and the backdrop of wordless voices from the front of the store. It still felt weird to be so open about coming in, not Midoriya's style at all, but step by step he caught up with Mao as they headed directly towards the back entrance like they belonged there. Climbing up the stairwell and walking in, the bay itself wasn't huge, a receiving area as big as the inside of a van, and then, rows of closed shelving with boxes laying on and around them. There were things like packages of energy drinks, boxes of snacks, and other paraphernalia. Midoriya had to be careful as he stepped over some cheap toys that spilled out of a box, looking around for some actual people. He could make out a few through the aisles who were looking right back at him, some pointing at him and Mao. 2 came towards them, 1 went to the front. See Indian backquote Seuss. Mao flicked the vest coattails back to put his hands in his pockets as he kept walking forward, his eyes trailing up a random shelf and pushing it with an arm to watch it wobble. Besides the health code violations, Midoriya stared up at it too, shaking his head at the literally and metaphorically shaky shelving situation, then turned his head around to look for what he wanted, evidence of the Yakuza, specifically, the drugs. The air was thick with spices from the front of the store, the boxes didn't seem to be in great shape, and the 2 employees were coming closer. Not at a glance. This is why I wanted to wait. Yee. Mao brushed him off, shoving the box aside with his foot as he walked towards the 2 employees and shot them a confident nod. Yo. Hey, this area is staff only. Get out. The employees looked rough like they could at least handle the boxes on their own. Looking them over for details, they both were pretty clean looking. Work gloves on hands, masks covering their mouths, some basic hygiene and safety stuff. Midoriya glanced towards Mao who was already gearing up to punch the closest one, sighed, then started doing what was apparently becoming one of his talents. Bullshitting. He stepped up, putting a hand against Mao as if to hold him back and to signal who'd take this part. We're here for an inspection. The guys up high wanted to check in, so here we are. It was a weak story, he didn't even have a real reason, he'd just work on it as he went along. However, the 2 employees just stared at him for a moment, looking him dead in the eyes or rather, looking directly at his bandana over his eyes, then whispered to one another as they turned slightly. One of them had a strange shape in the back of his waistband, a gun. You hear anything about this? Wouldn't be a surprise inspection if you did, Midoriya added, pushing forward with a backing of more bullshit. You need to be told to breathe, too. Move. Midoriya had no idea why his bullshit was working so well, but the 2 employees seemed to react better the more abrasive he was. Maybe it was the presence of Mao looming over everyone, maybe they just were new hires. Whatever was happening, it felt like Midoriya had set his expectations of this place way too high. This was breaking into a drug lab, this was the source for many of the takedowns Midoriya had been doing over the last month, this was. Aye, boss. The big man sent 2 guys over. Really? I thought the bullet was coming later. Midoriya wanted to punch Mao in the face with a cheesy expression the giant was making as sure enough they were led straight into the back of the store and over to one side. Right into what was obviously a drug lab. It was messy, with large plastic sheets over everything, what looked like chemistry equipment all over the place, an intense lack of cleaning, and chemicals everywhere. Whether spilled on the floor, stained into the sheets, inside glass containers, or sitting in massive packs and barrels on the floor, this shit was everywhere. There were more men inside the lab, wearing plastic bodysuits like you'd associate with hazmat or something, and everyone had masks. In fact, it wasn't until this exact moment that Midoriya started to catch on that this Yakuza might have had a mask theme, as even the ones not wearing breathing masks had something covering their mouths. So, you 2 were the one the bullet sent. Where are your fucking masks? A smaller man who seemed to be the head of the operation shouted, unzipping his suit to expose a familiar handle the grip of a gun. Both of them saw it, and with just one exchange, they nodded as they both reached for their masks. Thinking we're going to be walking around all over the place with them. How unprofessional. Seriously, Yumyu's backquote got a screw loose cause ya lighter backquote asking backquote for dis. The vibe of the entire room switched as the 2 men put on their masks, each one reaching back to grab the employee who'd led them there and simultaneously beating them just as the drug maker started to panic. The man who'd been previously going for his gun reached into his suit, nearly dropping the gun because of his gloves, then drawing it and holding it up with both hands and pointing it towards the 2 sudden rushing forces coming for him. Oh, shit, it's them. Mao took care of his Yakuza by slamming him headfirst into the nearest wall, and when that little prick started to pull out his piece, he put the Yakuza between him and the heap, walking forward while laughing maniacally. The leader fumbled for his gun, drawing it just as Mao drew up on his block by coolly walking up before smashing the punk in his hands into the punk in his way. The 2 men crashed into each other, skulls cracking against one another before Mao punted them both down with a snap kick that sent both flying like ragdolls. Bang. Bang bang. Mao took a bullet to the mask, staggering for a moment before glancing at the punk who was firing at him, watching as the bitch practically shot himself as Mao turned toward him and picked up a table, lifting it like a shield to block the next few bullets. The gunfire punched through the table but lost a lot of power, and between Mao's vest with the new metal and Mao's own hype, it wasn't even cheap, man. The main man crossed the lab with his impromptu shield, pushing through and knocking aside the strewn about equipment and materials all his way to his latest target until close enough, then adjusting his grip on the shield before lobbing it as a makeshift projectile at where he thought the little bitch was. The little bitch in question dove out of the way behind more equipment, hiding between barrels and tables to dodge as he landed on his hands and knees. More men were starting to flood the scene, probably the security from up front. Mao glanced at them just to count before there was the click of a piece and some invisible force slammed into the newcomers, knocking them on their asses. There behind the newcomers, hiding in a corner like a little rat, was Ronin. The pair exchanged one nod as Mao grinned, throwing back the coattails of his vest and grabbing the 2 pieces of his Scanabo, drawing them with a flourish before slamming both ends into his current prey. Ronin weaved around the injured Yakuza, the man who fumbled his gun and seemed to be the leader, keeping his eye on all the scene. Mao was wrecking house, but some people were trying to get away. Not on his watch. It only took a little repositioning to set himself between the mess of tables and the only exit, another example of a safety fail. Muramasa didn't even get drawn as Ronin took his stance slightly out of the way, then his 3 lab workers made their way to the door. Bam. Ba boom. Kerthunk. One stab to the inside of the leg, tripping the first. One got smacked in the chest before a clawed hand pulled him in for a headbutt, then let him drop like a sack of rocks. The last one stumbled over the mess of limbs, too busy looking back at the monster that was Mao to see the flying sword until it struck him in the face, knocking him flat on his ass and out like a light. Midoriya only had a moment to look over his mess, stepping back into the shadows before suddenly more men came in from the other side of the doorway. They were entering the lab instead of trying to run, with weapons drawn. Was this a security? Needing a way to try and cause a lot of small damage fast, Ronin one-handed his sword and drew kindness and started prepping a charge shot, letting the men enter a small way and to ensure none escaped, then struck. Once all had passed the door frame, one began to raise his gun. Weren't guns supposed to be hard to get in Japan? To prove this point, Ronin raised his own custom gun and shot the charge shot straight into the men's legs from behind, a sudden sweeping force that knocked them into each other. He then closed in with his sword, smashing into them to fully knock them over. Then he took a step back, switching his gaze to Mao's opponent, and took a step back. Bang. Yeah. Boom tilde. Ronin and Mao briefly shot past each other as they switched targets, with Ronin exchanging fire with the people still standing in the laboratory, his armor more than capable of taking a few bullets even as the concussive force of being shot rocked Ronin back slightly with every hit. In exchange, he fired back with his own concussive force, firing a barrage of air blasts to knock into the scientists. It wasn't foolproof. Some scientists started to figure out that they should brace into objects to avoid being knocked over, so Ronin got creative and started shooting all the junk around the room, like the lab equipment on top of the tables. That shit went flying, crashing into people and breaking. It looked as painful as it sounded as glass vials shattered on impact, their shards blasted backward. And on the other side. With the signal from Ronin, Mal leapt across the room like a human cannonball, slamming the two halves of the canopy together and twisting to lock them in, then pulled it back like a sledgehammer as he vaulted for the pile of bodies trying to untangle themselves. Bang. Ronin was quick to switch targets, firing off at people behind Mao, so the main man could focus solely on hitting these bunks so hard they became a permanent part of the floor. He couldn't help laughing as he planted his feet, turning all the momentum of his charge downward just as he reached the Yakuza's reinforcements before slamming the canopo down into the pile with a loud boom tilde. The quirk in the canopo activated, sending out a shockwave of some kind as it impacted. With a major blow dealt, Mao thrust the canopo into the crowded dog pile, spearing the Yakuza off the top of the pile and into the air before turning around and hitting that motherfucker with a baseball swing, sending him right back where he came from crashing into the storage room. He gave one final slam into the pile, then turned and gave a wide swing that nearly sent a lab guy who'd been trying to bail out a window bailing out of life if he didn't fall on his ass, screaming his head off as he covered his body with his arms, crossing them to protect himself and forming a nice little target. X marks spot tilde. That motherfucker got a free flight, and he didn't even need tickets. The lucky bastard. Ronin kept firing at people, all the way using his parkour to get around the increasing mess of the lab as the ground became more glass and tile. He hopped the table, vaulting straight into a gunman and kicking him back, then shooting out one leg and slamming the falling man's head into a table and letting him slump down. He then turned, raising his gun to harass the next guy before Mao took a wide swing at him. The big guy had that guy covered, so Ronin moved on. He turned slightly, but in that slight pause, someone ran up and tackled the small vigilante, trying to lift him up. Even with his gear, he wasn't that heavy, and instead of his Beowulf boots locking onto the floor like Ronin wanted, they only picked up broken glass and tarp, letting Ronin get lifted like a sack of potatoes before being rammed into a wall with a solid thunk giving way to a loud crash. The first thing Ronin noticed is that damn, this helmet was way better than his last one. The back of his head felt fine even as he was turned into an impromptu battering ram, breaking a window as he was driven backward. He grabbed the windowsill to stop his backward momentum, dropping his sword for a second before lashing out with a knee into a kick and releasing the glass stuck to his boot. The man's grunt turned into a scream as first he was doubled over by a sudden knee, then a foot-bringing sharp glass dug into his stomach. He slumped over, curled up, and Ronin made a note to get that guy immediate medical attention when this was over. With the fun slowing down, now Ronin could hear shouting from the front and not a disciplined kind. It looks like either there was a mess happening up front on account of almost everyone being back here. Now, all of the employees had to know what was going on back here. This lab was way too obvious. That meant all employees were in on the gig, so that meant no one escaped. Ronin kicked his sword off the ground, grabbing it midair and putting it back on his hip. I'm going up front to deal with the rest. You've got it back here. Bwahaha tilde. Fair point. Ronin hopped over the pile of bodies at the entrance, moving through the storage area and cluttered to reach the front area where there were a few employees, a few teenagers in Slavi uniform, a few adults with pieces, and past them, a small crowd of people. Now, as Ronin walked forward, most of the employees turned to look at who was coming out, as did the customers. Ronin's gaze flitted across all of them, lingering on the teenagers, some just a year or two older than him. Could he really try to beat all of them into submission just for working in the same store as a drug lab? Bang, 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 bang. Ronin coldly flicked up both his guns as he took out everyone on his side of the store, then started to build up momentum before he hit the counter and flipped straight over it into the screaming crowd and firing his guns into the air. On the ground, now. The panic and unspoken rules took almost everyone to the floor immediately, with everyone knowing it was better to comply than be shot. Even if his guns didn't fire real bullets, but they didn't have to know that. Using the terror of being a villain, taking over the scene was pretty easy. He went up to the front door and locked it, then put a fuse of ties around the door holder, the thing usually at the top of doors that slow down how quickly they close and open. With those fuse of ties, the door holder was stuck, and it wouldn't budge, a cheap and quick barricade. With the door dealt with, Ronin turned back, looking over the small mixed crowd. There was an ambience of fear in the air as people stared up at him, far different than what a hero would accrue, but he wasn't a hero. Not by a long shot. Don't resist, and we'll all make it out of here nice and safely, alright? It never occurred to Midoriya that as little as Ronin or Ken looked like a hero, they were practically a textbook villain, clearly muscular, an outfit that matched the Shihasai guy fairly well, and a threatening air of menace and violence that was completely genuine. The semblance was especially strong when he leaned into it, like he was now, using that fear to take control over the situation and keep everyone settled. With that done, he moved back around to the back, slamming both of his guns into one of the employees' head as he tried to get up and then shooting him 6 times in the chest to make his point, then kicking him to one side. I'm done with my side, how are you doing back there? Just, wham, about, wham, Donishi tilde. Ronin walked to the storage section just as a man tried to run out, then took an entire chair to the back of the head and collapsed. Following the escapee in the chair, the main man lumbered out with a laugh, his massive canopo resting against his shoulder. He looked perfect for a guy who needed to just be scary. Perfect timing. Head up front and beat the shit out of anyone who resists. Wait, employees only. If they're civilians, just knock him around a bit, alright. Fixing his phrasing, Ronin drew out more zip ties to begin getting everyone all wrapped up for when the cops arrive. I'll call the cops when I'm done, we seal the back door and run, then when the cops arrive we'll already be miles from this place. See, now that's a good plan. I like that plan. Mal laughed as squeezed past Ronin, giving the vigilante a pat on the back before lumbering to the front. Alright, shits, I want all phones in a pile. If I see anyone getting any ideas, I'ma smash your head open sweet. Mal's voice got more and more distant with distance, for some reason, giving Ronin the clarity to wrap up people's arms behind them quickly. He flipped people onto their front, tying their arms behind their back and leaving them on the ground. There was only one in the storeroom, but... Beep, 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 thunk tilde. Hey, can a brother get an open door in this bit? Jesus, like I gotta do everything. From outside came noises of the truck backing in, then a door slamming shut. It was the truck Ronin wanted to wait for. It was. On time. For once. Well, what a nice surprise. Ronin veered into a hidden spot to not be immediately obvious as he ready to charge shot at the door, resting his arm on the box while crouching slightly. His breathing slowed as his focus grew, eyes squinted beneath his helmet and as soon as he saw a body in his iron sights. Jesus, this place is more of a mess than even my own house. Your lucky overhaul didn't want to check this place out, or he. Bang. FWK. FWK. Ronin's shot fired off in an instant as a figure entered his sights, and only after he fired did he take in the man's countenance. He was tall and lanky, but not as tall as Mao by a long shot. He wore an open fur vest, baggy pants, a big bottle on his hip, a big gray mask mostly smooth with 2 big eyes holes, covered by some sort of mesh and shoulder-length dark hair. The main thing Ronin noticed wasn't what he wore, though, it was how this man moved. As soon as the man registered something was amiss, he seamlessly dropped to the floor, Ronin's charge shot going straight over them, and then did a 2-handed push-up so hard he went right back to standing as if he never dodged, all while scanning the scene until locking masks against Ronin. Ah, it's like that, is it? Ronin pushed back from his starting position, giving up the cover for a better mobility position, gun still raised, while his opponent drew his bottle off his hip, flipping the thing before catching it by the neck as a flourish and resting it against his shoulder to square up. Ronin wasn't sure how this delivery driver had somehow dodged his ambush attack, but it was clear that whoever he was the best Yakuza in the building now. Luckily, he didn't run. But was this guy on the same level as the showman, that artsy prick who kicked Ronin's ass? Ronin looked over the man's confident but loose posture, now noting the nice mix of scars across his body and even gun wounds. The way this guy looked him over, scanning all of him at once, then locked on the umbrella on Ronin's hip. This guy was good, and that probably meant cheat. Chapter end notes. Yo, I am going on vacation Indiana 30 minutes editing is for nerds meet Sakari again anyways good luck Don. T worry if I die while in Mexico. My editor should know to orphan the FIC so someone else can finish it in my place. See ya in the news, blah. Adios amigos, I'm gonna go meet people. WHO actually speaks Spanish tilde. Chapter 230, dunked on by drunks. Chapter summary. Ronin meets and exchanges blows with one of the 8 bullets of the Shihasakai, the drunk drug dealer, Sakari. Chapter notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Somewhere between a squat and a stand, Ronin sized up the scene. He was in a small market shop on the far side of town, a front for a drug den for the Shuisakai Yakuza, whatever the hell the name meant. All across the floor in the drug den were the Yakuza he and now had just beat the snot out of, and he was mostly finished tying up. The problem lay in 2 entirely different directions. In the front of the store, beyond Ronin, were at least a dozen civilians who'd just been shopping here cause it was, on the surface, a market. Sure, some might be here to buy some illegal drugs and disperse some, but he had no idea who could improve it even if he did. Sure, he didn't really work on hard proof, but the idea was there. Mao was in there with the last of the store workers, forcing everyone down to the floor with hands behind their heads, acting like a professional villain taking charge of a scene because Mao kind of was a professional villain, just with a little career change. The idea of posing as villains made perfect sense at the time. You're in your local market and some guy with a katana walks out the back, beating the snot out of the staff. What are you gonna do? Call the heroes. Doesn't matter if Ronin posed as a hero, people would still call the cops would call the heroes, and then this vigilantism scene gets a whole lot messier, even messier than this shitty storeroom with junk scattered all over the floor. No, it was better to pose as villains and force everyone to the ground under the illusion of violence to make sure this was as clean as possible. Or at least, as clean as could be before this guy showed up. In the back of the store, before Ronin, was one weird-ass punk. Wearing an open vest, baggy pants, a mask and an apparent drinking problem was the guy, seeming almost just like the dozen or so other punks Ronin and Mao had just wiped out. But this guy was different. He was good, and he was well aware of it, having dodged Ronin's ambush with a goddamn gun. How many Yakuza could react when someone shoots at them from cover, dropping to the ground just as the shot flies over them then snapping back to a standing position? How many indeed? Ronin stared down the Yakuza, his fingers adjusting their grip on kindness. First the showman, then this guy. How many guys like this did the Yakuza have? Most heroes couldn't even beat guns. Hell, of the top 10, only 3 were bulletproof, and one of them was All Might. Was this why the Yakuza were so big? For once in his life, Ronin realized something. This fight might require a skill Ronin had never really used before, especially if there were more guys like the showman out there. He'd have to make small talk. God help him. Most people would be dead right now. How the hell did you dodge that? As he spoke, Ronin's hand held kindness steady. His moved his shoulder back to draw to for his second gun. No, if this guy could dodge a surprise gunshot, even 2 gun spraying wouldn't work. He tilde I'm not most people, now am I. The man laughed, moving drunkenly as he popped the cap off his bottle with his teeth and put it to his mouth. But he never took his eyes off Ronin, his head tilted so he could still make eye contact. Was this a feigned opening? His posture was loose but confident. No, that was definitely a trap. God damn it, too many of you Yakuza are too good. Where the hell are they getting you? Moving his shoulders forward, Ronin's free hand flicked back his coattails. His hand snaked back to grab a piece of his quarterstaff. But as he stood, he slowly walked around the haphazard aisles of the storage area. This place was too messy and too cramped. He'd never swing his axe and his spear might get stuck. In fact, was his sword even small enough to be used in this room? Shit, the terrain was completely terrible. He needed to draw him into the lab to gain the advantage and free up his weapon choice. I crawled straight out of hell, brother. The man messily wiped his face, closing the bottle by ramming it into his mouth easily enough, then shifted and damn, it was hard to notice, but this guy was moving even easier across this mess than Ronin was. This guy had to be a high mobility type, right? God, he sure hoped so. He didn't want to even think of fighting a powerhouse this agile. And you're straight out of our nightmares, aren't you? Ya tilde Kuza Hunter tilde. Oh, no, Yakuza Hunter's in the other room, Midoriya said as he straightened, smiling and speaking pleasantly as he pointed a thumb toward the front of the store over his shoulder. Bang. FSHK. As the man's head was naturally drawn with Midoriya's hand, Ronin fired a shot from the hip, a large blast missing by a mile as the man swerved between the metal aisles, then narrowly dodged the air knife Ronin had thrown as a follow-up as it twirled end over end, narrowly flicking between the shelving to nick his vest. Again the man dropped and rose to avoid the attack, but now he rose into a defensive posture, hunched to minimize his size. Ah, then you must be Ronin. Thought you were dead, the way you disappeared. Damn vigilantes, like flies. Your drugs must be too good for me to stay away. Without the element of surprise, Ronin continued to attack, throwing knives and punctuating them with gunfire when he thought the Yakuza would dive down to avoid the knives. Unfortunately, before Ronin could counter the Yakuza's dodging technique, his counter was countered preemptively. That's so. No longer did the Yakuza dive to the floor, now weaving and rolling around the knives. His footwork and weaving body even allowed him to sidestep an air blast, the shot just throwing back his vest in air fancifully before he dove in with a smile, running down the aisle straight at him. We aim to please, brother. Tisk, Ronin then finally went double guns, drawing Cupid and blasting the entire aisle in one motion. The combined gunfire knocked the Yakuza back, forcing and then maintaining distance. This stalking thing was harder than Ronin thought though, he couldn't concentrate. No wonder heroes were so bad at their job, they spent too much time quipping. And man, this drug thing's making bank. The built distance wouldn't last as the Yakuza stumbled back, then rolled with a shot. A blast hit him in the left shoulder and he let it spin him around on a dime, rolling behind a series of boxes then grabbing them and rushing straight at Ronin with his new shield. Overhaul put a bounty on your ass, who thought I'd be the one to get that too? You haven't gotten it yet. Ronin fired repeatedly towards the man, and instead of sidestepping the charge, walked into it to plant his feet and then go into a spinning back kick, spearing the box and crushing it with overwhelming force. But instead of launching the man, all he did was launch the box as the man let go and neatly slid around it, moving into Ronin's face and finally closing the gap. Yet tilde, the man smiled so big it was visible past his mask as he swayed around Ronin, the vigilante adjusting his guard as he turned, the Yakuza's arms neatly crossing over and around Ronin's to grab him by the face. The Yakuza's arm wrapped under Ronin's forearm, then over his bicep on the inside to grab Ronin's face while locking kindness in place. One gun was stuck, and couldn't be fired in any direction actually useful. Ronin tried to adjust his free arm to point it at the Yakuza, but suddenly a leg snaked between his as the Yakuza leaned forward, slamming the back of Ronin's head into a metal shelf. His helmet rattled, his footing was lost, and Ronin's shot went wide. Ronin scrambled first to regain his footing, then to try again with his free arm to shoot this slimy Yakuza. Slimy didn't even cover it as the Yakuza did a little hop up, getting onto the counter and sliding his grip Ronin's arm all the way to his hand, then wrapping his legs around Ronin's body. This motherfucker just slammed Ronin into a shelf with a judo move. And wait, wasn't this an armbar? So ya ain't as dumb as you look tilde. The man laughed, his entire body suddenly tensing with one fluid wave-like motion as he lurched back to dislocate Ronin's shoulder. But smarts won't save you now. Now. CHT tilde. There was a painful sound in Ronin's ears as his shoulder really did dislocate, but what the man was more confused by was why Ronin didn't drop the gun his injured arm was holding. The reason was simple, he couldn't. The Beowulf gauntlets were still on, pulling the gun to his palm even as pain racked Ronin's body and his hand muscles lost most of their strength, leaving him holding the gun. Pointed right at the Yakuza wrapped around his arm. Bang, bang 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 bang. What do you know? Ronin finally got a clean shot in, the man going slack after an air blast hit him with the force of a baseball bat to the bottom of his chin. Ronin didn't take second chances as he tried his hand at quipping. Ronin dropped his second gun and grabbed his bad arm with his good one, firing shot after shot as he slowly pulled himself off the shelf and turned it into a vantage point to shoot more easily from God. Every shot sent more force up his arm and into that dislocated shoulder. This hurt like a motherfucker. Looks like my smarts pulled through again. Ronin would blame his bad arm later, but because of his dislocated shoulder or the man's incredible reflexes, he did eat the shots just not in the way Ronin intended. Instead of hitting him flatly, the Yakuza angled his body, moving backward with the shots and keeping himself loose. The air blasts hit the Yakuza, but they just pushed him back heavily, causing his body to twist and turn but never causing serious harm until they had an entire aisle between them again. Sheet. The Yakuza moved sideways, breaking the distance and forcing Ronin to either keep trying to use two arms to shoot one gun or do something different. Ronin made his choice immediately, his good arm sliding up his bad one and gripping it tightly before he slammed into a shelf, pushing it back in place with a barely audible sound. Jesus, did pushing it back hurt. The movies made this look so damn easy. Who the hell even are you? Ronin snarled with the pain, working his arm and slamming a clenched fist into a shelf, using the motion to work out the pain of fixing his shoulder. He kicked his second pistol off the floor, grabbing it midair then readjusting his grip to holster it. These guns weren't cutting it, so no point in two. Time to switch weapons. Maybe I should be asking that what the hell is with those moves? You a movie star? The Yakuza laughed at Ronin's showy moves, then weaved as a more precise and smaller air blast weaved between the aisles, hitting the Yakuza's arm but causing no damage as the Yakuza spun with it, dispersing the force harmlessly. Me, though, I'm the guy who's gonna kick your ass. The man lunged forward as Ronin remembered a thing or two from his fight with the showman, having charged up a shot as the Yakuza spun and talked, then firing it straight into the side of the shelf. Produce and packaging exploded everywhere, and Ronin threw knives as fast as he could into the mess with his good arm, aiming to the wind as he just tried to get some numbers out. Then come get some, punk. The air was chock full of destroyed cardboard, dust, and a strangely sweet smell that slowly dispersed to reveal the scene. The Yakuza had finally taken a hit, a knife to the forearm and one to the jacket. Looked like the jacket stopped the knife, probably some reinforcements in there, but one good hit. Payback for the shoulder, but it didn't look like this would stop the Yakuza either. Sheet. Quote. Shit. The man clenched his teeth as he looked at the knife, moving his arm slightly, then took a deep breath before grabbing it and getting shot square in the chest as he pulled it out. His attention slipped. Shit. Tisk. That shot was supposed to hit this punk in the head. His aim was still bad. He should have used his good arm. Shit. Ronin worked his arm again, drawing an air knife and deliberately closing the gap now, ready to tussle. The Yakuza could sense it too, stumbling back, and he was not ready for it. The Yakuza glanced him over, a mix of confusion, horror, and intrigue across his posture and voice. Quote. Who the fuck are you? The Yakuza's nightmare, apparently. Now, are you getting on the ground, or am I gonna beat you and dead? Ronin threw the Yakuza's earlier words back in his face, being unable to think of a better one-liner, and then settled on his old reliable violence. He stood, a little unsteadily for some reason. Maybe this new helmet wasn't as good as he thought, cause he felt off. Maybe getting thrown into that shelf did something. Quote. I'm one of the 8 precepts of death, you little shit. Learn some respect. The Yakuza lurched forward, grabbing and lobbing a box off a shelf at Ronin's head. The vigilante stepped towards the flying box, swatting it out of the air, then suddenly feeling something a quirk effect. As Ronin tried to move forward, the ground itself shifted slightly. It was ever so slightly, but it was enough to knock aside his aim slightly. He was still swatting the box and moving towards the villain, but now, he was off balance. What the hell was this? An earthquake quirk. The Yakuza's smugness was visible, clearly confident in his quirk, perhaps thinking that a quirk that could shift the ground would easily win the fight, and that was why he hadn't used it so far. He advanced, raising his bottle like a club to beat Ronin over the head, and then a metal claw lunged out as Ronin grabbed hold on the motherfucker in front of him, something between a stumble and a tackle as he body checked the villain before firing the gun multiple times into his body. To say either one was in control as Ronin stumbled forward and sent both of them crashing into the main lobby of the store would be a lie. The Yakuza was lifted off his feet, caught off guard as he attempted to dodge a wild blow, until Beowulf pulled him right back in. Ronin was barely in control himself, forced to lean forward and keep moving to keep his balance. He used this as best as he could, pushing into his opponent, but he was not in control in any sense. The two slammed into the counter, then the Yakuza grabbed Ronin by his big coat and flipped both of them over the counter. Switching positions, Ronin had gone from on top and on the attack to crashing into a rack of breaded goods, landing upside down and getting kicked in the head to be launched further down the aisle. It would have looked cool if the guy who kicked him didn't also promptly tumble, tripping over a piece of bread but staying on his feet. All around the two were the civilians, and standing near the front entrance, Mao, resting on his big club with an air of surprise that quickly turned to amusement. "You need some help, genius, or..." "I've got this," Revenant snarled as he stood up with some help from a nearby aisle. The strange wobbling of the ground was giving him a headache, and the world seemed to tilt slightly in front of his eyes. If he could rub them, he would, but he couldn't, so he just pushed through, uprighting himself and moving back to build distance while taking aim with his gun and firing 2 shots that seemed like they were just about to hit before the Yakuza easily swerved past them. "Where the hell ya shooting back, quote, dumbass Tilda? Shut it." The Yakuza had stopped talking now, making his watt straight up to while Ronin missed a third and fourth shot. What the fuck was his aim? Before Ronin could contemplate his string of misses, the Yakuza smashed the bottle into Ronin's gun, first knocking it down and out of the way, then deflecting off that to smash the bottle into Ronin's face. Ronin still was Ronin and had the decent sense to lean back, covering his face and blocking the shot with his free arm, then advanced back with a wide stance, stood just for the shaking, and suddenly one of his legs just went out from under him. What the fuck was happening? "Take this, you stupid villain." From behind Ronin, someone shouted that out, running forward and tackling the supposed villain by the leg. And by supposed villain, that of course meant Ronin. Ronin had the entire ride from a standing position to him face planting into the ground to realize what happened before. With the civilian's help, the Yakuza jumped up and drop-kicked Ronin in the face as he was falling, breaking his nose as 2 boots crushed the mask against his face. Mao was laughing his ass off, but he'd seen enough. With confidence he flipped the cannabis to an actual usable position, preparing to beat the shit out of the Yakuza and whoever else got in his way when suddenly more people got in his way, namely, almost everyone, seeing it worked so well the first time. Mao got a kick out of it as a man stepped in his way, raising his fist before the main man reminded Ronin that Mao wasn't a vigilante, his arm lashing between the man's to grab him by his throat and lift him off the ground, sliding the big bat off his shoulder. Mao was about to send this man flying like a baseball, and Midoriya was pretty sure the end destination would be the hospital at best. Shitty. No civvies. GHK. For some reason, Ronin was breathing heavily, and the world was moving like it was water. What the fuck was happening? He was constantly missing, he couldn't balance, he felt hot. And his head was pounding. Revenant snarled as a civilian tried to grab him, pushing off the floor and throwing the civilian aside. "Shit. Smash and run. You ain't running nowhere, pal." The Yakuza was completely fine, working his body, then leaning forward as the crowd around started to move in. Cheered for him. This shouldn't have been surprising, and luckily it wasn't, but it was salt in the wound. Unfortunately, Ronin could still see as the Yakuza drew just a single knife, seeming totally fine with taking on the 2 of them even with the civilians. Or perhaps, because of the civilians. Quote. Sheet. Midoriya didn't have to weigh up his options, he knew his limits. Even if he could keep fighting, the Yakuza's quirk was taking a toll on him, and he couldn't get a clean takedown. This wasn't about his own safety, he had the bodysuit. This was about civilians, and between himself being literally and figuratively off balance. With both the main man and the Yakuza not seeming to mind getting violent with civilians, there wasn't any way he could reasonably keep the civilians out of the way and win, especially while they were attacking him, like when tried to jump him from behind. "We're leaving now." Midoriya shifted on the spot, grabbing the woman's arm as it wrapped over him and spinning around to toss her away harmlessly. At the very least, they did what they were supposed to, wreck the lab, beat the snot out of criminals, and now the heroes and police would be here any moment. Technically, this was exactly what Ronin wanted, a shame he just couldn't take the extra slice of the pie and beat this final Yakuza into the dirt. Plan Z. Da fuck his plan. The main man's question was answered before he could even finish as Ronin grabbed 2 things off his belt, dropping them and grabbing an aisle for support as the world seemed to shift again, then toppled a shelving unit between him and the Yakuza for cover. The cover didn't even slow down the acrobatic villain who neatly jumped over the shelf, putting him right in the air as the flashbang and smoke grenade went off nearly simultaneously. Ronin was already backing away towards a window, slamming an elbow into it and only being annoyed when it didn't break. He then leaned against it for support, stumbling towards the door and eating a punch to the body before countering with a shove as he made his way to the door, breaking the barricade Mao had made away and stumbling out. We got what we want, now bail. Bail. ... That means now, dumbass. It took a little coaxing to get Mao out, the big guy breaking a window and jumping out it like Midoriya tried to. He was still obviously smirking as he moved past Ronin, the pair moving in the direction of their escape. Until Mao started slowing down as Ronin kept stumbling, unable to lean on anything as he walked in the open. Da fuck ya doing that quote. Mao looked over him, unimpressed, but as the door was thrown open and civilians piled out, there wasn't much of a time for questions now. The main man was totally okay with throwing hands with these overzealous cities a little longer, but it wasn't worth it. We won. Ronin stumbled, leaning against Mao and not even protesting when the main man picked him up and started running towards Mao's bike. There, take it out of there. We found the lab, ruined it, and exposed it. There's no way Shu Isekai can hide it, but there's no reason to be here when the cops show up, so we gotta run. Hopefully, the Yakuza realized it too. Any civilians injured are just going to bring more heat, so he should slip out quietly, probably pretending to chase us. I get it. Jesus, you talkative today. Mao shook his head as he put some effort in, jogging faster down the street. Some people were already starting to chase them, largely unaware of the situation they were leaving behind. Mao kept his mouth shut, since Midoriya seemed so eager to flap his gums, doing work as he ran past buildings into the bike, dumping Midoriya off to one side as he settled into it, turned it on, caught Midoriya as a young vigilante nearly stumbled right past the bike, and dumped him unceremoniously on the seat behind himself before gunning it out of there. They only had to drive for a few minutes to completely evacuate the scene with Mao's opinion of speed limits, stopping off in a different section of the city to switch costumes and start walking away. Mao opened up the garage door and the storage unit lent to him, leaving his motorcycle inside before switching his vest for a real shirt, ditching the mask and cannabis, and locking the place up. He had already started shapeshifting back to his usual appearance on the drive back, already gaining a few inches of height back and becoming harder to recognize by the minute. In about 20 more, there was no way anyone would reasonably mistake him for being at the scene of the crime with his very distinct appearance. Midoriya took a little longer than usual, still feeling the effects of the villain's quirk. The drive over had illuminated something fairly obvious that he should have thought up sooner. That Yakuza's quirk didn't move the ground, it was just moving him, or rather, the Yakuza's quirk wasn't affecting the entire floor of the building, it was just affecting Midoriya and he overthought it. For some reason, Midoriya's sense of balance was completely out of whack now. I think his quirk must have been some kind of poison, Midoriya muttered as he leaned against the wall, struggling with his shirt to get himself through all the holes. But I have no idea how I got hit by it. I don't think his attacks ever got through my armor, so he couldn't stab me, could he? Midoriya gave himself a quick pat over, then grabbed his head, being hit by another wave of nausea and leaning against the wall for support. I should have an anti-venom kit in my things. Shit, I'm not sure how good it is against quirks. Can you grab it for me, Mao? Mao was unaffected save for his amusement at Midoriya's predicament, getting a chuckle before going over to Midoriya's bag, looking through it, and giving up. He brought the entire thing to Midoriya, content to let him do all the work. There ya go, Senipiter. Who'da thunk y'd be so bad against? SNF, poison. His expression shifting from amusement to confusion, Mao leaned forward a bit, smelling the air, then looking over Midoriya again. Aye, Seni, breathe out. Look me in the eye. Midoriya's expression turned grave at Mao's confusing reaction. Was this poison famous or something? Maybe it was from the drug lab. Slightly spooked, Midoriya breathed out through his mouth, looking Mao in the eye as the main man grabbed his head and turned it slightly before stepping back and nodding. Quote ... Is it that bad? Quote ... Backquote afraid so, Mao said with a shrug, looking him over and thinking it over. Truth is, Seni, you're a lightweight. You're a lightweight. You're a lightweight. Quote ... What? Seni, I'm afraid you got hit with some illegal shit. This stuff's only legal in Germany, I tell ya. Mao nodded stoically, then leaned forward, his face breaking into a big grin as he couldn't contain the joke anymore. You're drunk. Quote ... What? Midoriya cocked his head, even more confused. But. She's illegal, man, I know ya like it loud and backquote rowdy, but ya too young. Man, imagine what backquote ya parents be thinking backquote if they saw this she tilda. Mao was trying hard not to laugh, and failing. Horribly. Guess, technically, ya really were poisoned. Man, most people be paying backquote to get this buzz. How the fuck did ya get sloshed this fast? Guess I ain't ever talking backquote ya dumbass bar hopping backquote. Quote ... But, I haven't had any. If there was any alcohol in Midoriya's system, it was certainly slowing him down as he got stuck on the fact that he hadn't drank anything alcoholic. His mom didn't drink much, only when his dad came home, but even still, all he had was his usual energy drinks. Did the Gatorade betray me? Quote ... PFT. Mao fully laughed now, slapping his knee before standing up as Midoriya focused on the entirely wrong thing. Yakuza guy, quirk, probably backquote made ya drunk. Remember, sheesh, you fall apart fast. Guess it's cause you're so small, shrimp. Midoriya nodded slowly, trying to put it together bit by bit. The Yakuza guy had a quirk that made Midoriya drunk. Yeah, that made some sense. The Yakuza had carried a bottle as a weapon, and even drank a ton from it at the start. So, his quirk could spread out whatever was wrong with him to other people maybe. Like, if the Yakuza got poisoned, he could make other people poisoned. But how did he do it? Line of sight. The bodysuit and helmet blocked off Ronin's entire body. Touch. Once again the bodysuit and helmet should block that. The quirk should not work by proximity, otherwise, the effect would have probably ended as Midoriya moved away from the Yakuza. It had to get to him somehow, but Revenant could not figure out how. All of his skin was protected, both his and the Yakuza's eyes were blocked by their own respective masks so it could not be eye contact or subliminal, especially when Mao had figured it out by smelling the air, implying there was alcohol in Revenant's body, enough to smell it in his. Breath. Midoriya paused, rubbing his head as he worked out the headache, then moved over to the culprit gap in his defenses. He picked up his new mask, disassembled it into 3 pieces, and grabbed specifically the mouthpiece. Ronin's mask had a specific mouthguard function, a gas mask breathing piece combo originally meant for underwater use with 5 minutes of pre-stored air and a regulator to clean the air he breathed in. Except, that was in his old mask, the one he stole from Yue. Although he never used the pre-stored air cartridges, he had gotten so used to the gas mask portion that he had forgotten all about it and never thought to ask about getting it for his new mask. Quote ... Sheet. Midoriya pursed his lips, thinking it over, then chuckled. Quote ... I got drunk. I lost that fight because I got drunk. On the job. Wa backquote slap R. PFFT. Midoriya couldn't help but laugh even if he was annoyed, shaking his head before rising off the floor and using the wall for support. I'm not even in the workforce yet and I'm already a terrible worker that takes effort. Guess I can't go home yet, though. Don't suppose you know any ways to get rid of. What is this, a hangover? Oh, you think this she's a hangover? Ha. Mao laughed, giving Midoriya a pat on the back as they walked out of the storage area towards their usual meetup spot, a certain mini-golf course where Midoriya figured he was about to kill a lot of time. Ironic, it was so easy to hide bruises with all his years of practice from long sleeves to makeup, but this was an entirely new beast. His mom and his dad would have his ass if they even thought for a moment he'd been drinking alcohol unsupervised. Come on, punk, you're in for a fun time. Wanna try doing some acrobatics? Zhu backquote do a handstand for me, real quick. Man, fuck off. Midoriya shook his head, working a hand through his hair as he moved beside the main man, trying to slowly regain his bearings. All in all, great night. Raided one of Shu Isekai's drug labs, leaving them no time to hide the evidence, and left something like a dozen criminals zip-tied on the floor. Met one of the 8 precepts of death, which sounded vaguely familiar, and got some good info on his quirk. Escaped cleanly. Nobody got hurt. The Yakuza sounded way too important to be dumb enough to try attacking civilians instead of doing the smart thing and running away too, so even if they didn't bag him, they completely ruined the Yakuza's plans. A great night indeed. And now, to make his night perfect, all he had to do was work off this buzz and make it home without being cut by his mom for something that only worried him a bit he might not be able to conceal, and the lecture he might get that he feared a lot more than meeting another one of those 8 precepts of death, like the physical manifestation of day drinking, or whoever that guy was. Chapter end notes. Yo, so, I'ma start by putting this here and repeating it a lot, cause I had something similar happen with Muscular. I am going to make the Shihasakai a lot stronger than canon. Firstly, it makes sense for their members to be very strong. It is strong enough to operate in a world of superheroes and spandex. If it wasn't strong, it makes no sense that there will be a big operation to topple them. It's not enough to just have one strong person. Either they need a massive force supplemented by several stronger upper levels to warrant an entire operation with a combined SWAT team, a top 10 hero, 2 people good enough to be top 10 heroes, the future number 1 hero even if he hasn't graduated yet, and several additional heroes. Canon Shihasakai is cool, but when it comes to brass tacks, they ain't shit. I'm not planning to go crazy with this power-up. For example, this chapter featured Diodoro Sakari, aka the drunk guy you might not remember because in canon he gets one tap by Lemillion in his one and only fight. I have an explanation of how his quirk works more scientifically that I intend to stick to. Hopefully, it was clear how I altered him and how I plan to alter most of my antagonists by giving them a brain. He wasn't much stronger suddenly. He really couldn't punch straight through the bodysuit. He just exposed some current weak points in Ronin's guard, such as dislocations by attacking the joints. I'll try to explain it more next chapter, as well as explore what happens from the first alrightish big attack against the Shihasakai, which while technically going as good as Midoriya wanted in his planning, didn't go as well as possible. In other news, we finally found how to make Midoriya relax. Breaking more laws with underage alcohol sniffing. Yee tilde. We'll see how Midoriya reacts to this next chapter when his head is back on straight, but for now, this is it. Thanks for stopping by and giving this a read, and adios amigos. Till we meet again tilde. Chapter 231. Chapter notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Being drunk was a strange thing. New experiences were always strange. Trying to figure out how this new thing compared to things you've done before, what you've done and experienced. At the moment, Midoriya's best comparison is that getting drunk is like getting sick. Why would anyone do this to themselves? His limbs felt strange, his head was pounding, and there was an uncomfortable warmth in his chest. He was basically asking to be ambushed and get his ass kicked. There were also the more specific problems. His sense of pain had been dulled even further, if that was possible, and he had already completely forgotten that his nose was broken. If it hadn't been for Mao catching him before they split ways, resetting it would have completely slipped Midoriya's mind. Luckily, they had a few hours together bonding over both of them being dogshit at mini-golf before they parted ways. It was a weird walk home, slowly coming off the buzz in the darkness, with ache slowly returning bit by bit. His shoulder flared up, seemingly at random until he remembered it had just been dislocated. His neck too reminding him that he had gotten slammed face first into a shelf. These were all the minor details that slightly blurred together, especially on very action-packed nights like tonight. Midoriya stood outside his door a moment extra. He didn't need a slap in the face to wake him up. No, the aggravation of the minor injuries that went through his bodysuit and his own poor defenses did that plenty. He gave himself a quick grooming, making sure he looked alright, then tried to open his neighbor's door 3 times before realizing his mistake and switching to the right door. I'm home. Midoriya smiled as he walked in, trying to be as presentable as possible. Stealth was an option, but Midoriya thought that taking it head on was the best course. There'd be questions if he was caught. His mom would be on guard and might notice the alcoholic smell that stuck to literally everything that had been in that damn warehouse. With his game being literally and metaphorically thrown off by the booze, it was best not to try it. But Midoriya could never quite remember his own rocky relationship with plans. Izuku, you're early. Inko Midoriya greeted Izuku with a smile as he stumbled in, more nerves than booze at this point as he fumbled with his shoes and tuned out. Good day. Yeah, real good. Spent some time with a friend after school, hit the city, good time all around, Izuku said, giving his mom his best reassuring smile while trying to take his shoelaces on one-handed. In the end, he had to admit defeat and drop his bag to free up both hands while he undid the messy knot he made. Oh, that sounds like fun. Was it that Aiko girl from your class? She seemed a little intense. Inko muttered more to herself, unaware how off she was but how on she was about the real Voorhees Izuku had been spending time with. You can bring her over again sometime if you'd like. Tomorrow, we're going to have some company over. Maybe you could bring Aiko and her parents. Not tomorrow. Mitsuki hardly needs more people to get her riled up, and Katsuki. Yeah, I'll talk to her about it, Izuku said dismissively, the long sentences going long and far over his head as he finally got his shoes untied. But, more importantly, dinner tonight. You need any help, Mom? Ah, so thoughtful. Inko gave Izuku a grateful smile, directing him further in and towards the kitchen. Most of the food is done. If you could set out the rice and plates while I finish up, that'd be lovely. SNF. Say, did you get something on your shirt? Yeah, someone spilled their drink on you while we were out. Hey, let me get those cups. And so, Izuku swiftly brushed past the alcoholic smell while also brushing past his own realization of his impending misfortune, as he usually did. Thursday's training went roughly on schedule, lining up well with the bare semblance of a plan Midoriya laid out. The young teacher wondered if there was a ratio of how much plan to how much ad-lib he should do to keep his plans from going to complete shit, or if it was just dumb luck that the training was going so well so far. Perhaps it was because everything went horribly wrong in the first day. From the top, Bakugo was in high spirits. The training Bakugo needed was fine-tuning, working on what he had, putting it through its paces, and trying it out in practice. This also happened to be the exact thing he was doing yesterday, and this was a running theme for almost all of the students. The general vibe was just yesterday, but more. As each student continued and pushed forward in their training, from Mina and Zero practicing in the movement area to Bakugo and Sato locking in within the concrete city, it felt like everyone had a good idea of what they wanted to do, even the students who weren't in exam F. Next, Midoriya nodded as he walked back into the gym, his eyes moving leftward from the entrance as he took the entire place in, searching for one person in particular. Not Bakugo up high, seeming to mutter about some distraction after school, not Kirishima down low, talking with Smintas and still trying to find a direction, but Kaminari, it's your turn. Come when you're ready. Midoriya could hardly get the words out of his mouth before Kaminari ran across the space. The blonde blur's quirk quarantine was over, and he was more excited to get back to training, overtaking and greeting his temporary teacher with a big grin and even bigger motions. Keeping his own motion smaller but slowly ramping up to match his excited student, Midoriya led Kaminari across the way from one gym to another, the pair going over Kaminari's routine throughout the day, gradually zeroing in on what the aspiring hero wanted to do. There's a lot of options ahead of you. Sword practice, quirk practice, acrobatics practice, and more, so many combinations. Kaminari seemed as unfocused as his future with so many options ahead of himself. He'd spent the day so far practicing his quirk use, using his quirk on his legs and walking around the gym, and yesterday he'd spent almost all his time doing basic sword practice and some light sparring. Now though, it was time for a little direction. Remember, this isn't for the rest of your life, this training is just for the provisional license exam. Midoriya reminded as gently as he could as they entered the concrete city, trying to put some framework. You only need to pick a direction to train in. What skills do you think will be the most useful for the exam? Quote. Kaminari's mouth drew into a thin line that got wider and wider as he stared off, thinking this way and that as his head bobbed one way then another. Quote. I dunno. What's on the exam? Quote. What's on? Midoriya stopped in the spot, head tilting slightly, then thought it over and nodded a bit himself. Quote. Well, that's a good question. So good I think we'll go over it again tomorrow, because I think everyone needs to hear that, but specifically, no one outside the association knows. They have about 7 exams, and they switch around which one they do every year. One time, I think they did the same exam 3 times in a row just to mess with everyone. I'd recommend studying the past ones, just for your own sake. Rambling on, Midoriya decided the spot he stopped in was as good as any to drop his things as he talked. Quote dot dot dot. And the one in 223, 7. That sounds right 2237, summertime, off-site. There was a heroine with a quirk very similar to yours I believe definitely one to review. Yeah, I think that's the one my mom was in when she was in hero school. She's a pro hero now. Man, I can't believe she never told me there was another girl with an electric quirk in the same test as her. Quote dot dot dot. Kaminari, that probably was her. Quote dot dot dot. Oh, shit, you're right. With a smirk and a shake of the head, Midoriya tried to pull Kaminari back into the moment and pull himself out of his rambling. Alright, but what matters is some rough basics. Every exam has two things, saving civilians and combat. Generally, you just have to be good at one and alright at the other. Which one do you want to focus on? Saving people. Kaminari had a quick response, already doing some excited karate chops that seemed more like combat than saving people. It seemed like saying saving people was more what people defaulted to than actually meant. Revenant would not be surprised if even he said it if pushed. But perhaps that was his nihilistic side projecting. Alright, that's good. So, what will you focus on to help save people? Day. And there you had it. You can. Think of ways you'll rescue people, go over safety protocols, might do that tomorrow, try to make yourself more safe and comfortable to be around. Midoriya tried spitting out a few ideas that popped into his head, with the last one catching Kaminari's attention. Looking safe, comfortable, that helps save people. Thinking over the victims he saw on the street, stumbling back from him after he beat their attackers into the dirt, their expressions of horror and fear as he loomed over them, well, it can help. Just something to think about. I'm thinking improving at combat might be easier. You're thinking right, I'm afraid. Midoriya was actually a little grateful. He was pretty sure he himself needed more help with the saving civilians thing than Kaminari did. What about combat do you want to improve the most? What part of your combat do you think can carry you through this exam? There were a lot more interesting expressions as Kaminari thought through this problem, his quirk that he'd all his life thinking about and building up versus the sheer practicality and simplicity of using his weapon. One was something Kaminari likely spent his entire childhood building up, being able to use his quirk as a hero, but the other was far easier and more practical even if Kaminari had less practice with it. Midoriya had his own answer, if he was in Kaminari's shoes, but I think I want to work on combining them. Kaminari nodded along as the words came out, seeming to feel it out as much as he thought it out. I'm getting better with my quirk at lower voltages. I think I'm getting this sword stuff. I want to try and doing a bit of this and a bit of that. Ya dig? A bit of quirk and a bit of weapon. If that wasn't a summary of possessed items, Midoriya didn't know what was. He got a little chuckle as he picked up his newest shin I made just this morning for this very thing. Alright, but first, a bit of trial and a bit of error. Walk to that post and back while using your quirk, come on. We've got a lot of training ahead. Closing out the day, all the students gathered up with the ringing of the bell to either leave and go home or to stay and go back to training. Before Exam F split, though, their teacher figured they'd share a few words. Exam F, gather up. Few words before we close out, shouldn't be long. 2 minutes, tops. A thoroughly whacked but unfazed Ronin stood before his students, looking over them proudly, the exhausted yet invigorated faces of his students who couldn't keep up with the small yet seemingly boundless energy of their teacher, who'd been more than happy to keep up with all of them throughout every step of their training. Seeing their attention, the old man smiled with some of that endless energy, nodding at each end going straight in. Tomorrow is the last day of training, so we'll try to do something special before the exam. Now, from what I know, the exam has two big criteria each year, combat and rescue. I'm not good at rescue, I can't teach you that, but we will go over the basics tomorrow as a final refresher. He tried to get a small moment with each, locking eyes with one student at a time, but the blindfold over his eyes made it much more difficult. Secondly, ultimate moves. You all should have been exploring them out, and if you have any questions about them, I must again admit I'm not the best expert. That would be the other teachers here at UA, who are here to help you. Ronin went for the openness angle wholeheartedly, gesturing to the other teachers around the room. He was trying to take honesty to heart, and practicing it as much as he could felt like a good start. Lastly, I cannot tell you what will be on the exam. I myself do not know. I do know it is designed to beat most students who take it, so to oversimplify it, you just have to better than most. For some realistic advice you can use, think before you act, try your best, and trust yourselves. You, A hasn't spent half a year training you to fail. It wasn't much, not even a minute. Ronin could also see not everyone got it. Went in one ear and out the other for most, but hey, at least he tried. With that little thing sorted, the students and the teachers headed their separate ways. Bakugo would usually stay back to train, but he was one of the first to leave, leading the pack of Exam F. Most went with him, save for Zero who wanted to practice this dive move, and Kaminari who was still trying to really combine his quirk use, leg motions, and some swordplay. Having just spent hours here trying to help, Midoriya figured it was time to let them cook and make himself scarce. He'd done his time. He gave Smintas a small acknowledgement before leaving the supervising teacher and Gym Gamma behind. He had to share a bus ride with the students of 1A, which was pretty weird especially when he sat in the very front near the other teachers who were leaving. He got to take a minute to sit in on Class 1A and their teachers, watching some of the dynamics and shenanigans completely unrelated to their profession for a bit. It was cool, he thought, to see All Might and Eraserhead chatting to one another, while the future professional heroes got to relax behind them. Reminded him of the UA summer camp before everything went to shit. From UA, it was a bit of a walk to the usual putt-putt spot, but pulling up just as Midoriya arrived and then acting like he'd been waiting for hours was the main man himself. The big guy couldn't help throwing some shots at the young alcoholic, wondering if they were going to go on a bar crawl once they were done, but the ribbing didn't last long. It felt like a miracle some police weren't stationed along the way between the putt-putt course and Mao's hideout, with how often they went along the same route doubling the speed limit. Somehow, though, no officers were waiting along the route to pull in the speedsters, and they pulled off the road and into the woods safely one more time. After passing through the front gate and heading in, they got straight to training. Mao threw some shade at Midoriya, noting that young Vigilante's ability to fight was drastically disconnected from his ability to talk even further than even Midoriya thought. Talking backquote and trashing backquote ain't too hard to do at the same time, dog. Mao laughed as Midoriya went through his usual warm-ups, a jog around the shooting range before stopping to do way too many push-ups. Yazoo backquote think too much. Or maybe I breathe from the same spot I talk. Midoriya puffed as he started his second lap. This kind of talk on a man who could probably hold his breath indefinitely was wasted, but it was interesting to think about. Was the reason he lost against that alcoholic Yakuza because he tried to talk too much? Well, it certainly could have been a factor. Or maybe Zhu backquote caused you down backquote practice. Mao kept up with the vigilante easily, talking all the while. Either his hype let him store energy without needing to constantly breathe, or he was really good at this, cause he seemed to talk as naturally as ever. When y'all fight, y'all always shut the fuck up. No banter, no witty remarks. I don't think I've ever you say something witty, period. Dear we do, that's sheet. Mao laughed loudly, giving Midoriya a slap on the back that pushed him forward a few stumbling steps before the vigilante regained his balance. Besides, talking leads to distractions. Midoriya tried his best to talk and run, but it was harder than he thought. As payback, he waited until Mao caught up to once again and jetted out his leg in a low kick, sweeping Mao's foot mid-stride and toppling the giant. One of us has to look professional. PFF. Mao took the trip in stride, stumbling himself for a few steps before catching himself with his hand and pushing off the ground, catching up easily. Yee, you're looking backquote sound professional as sheet of professional means boring. Can't ya get some color in your outfit? You try designing this shit. Midoriya took a big gulp of air, trying to push himself harder for the final leg of it. Mao just laughed as he turned up his effort, chasing right after the vigilante to pay him back. The training and sparring were nothing worth writing home about, just standard practice after a relatively standard day. The conversation was a bit more interesting, though. So, ta backquote Maro, Mao started as he pulled himself out of the chain link fence, stretching and pulling his clothes free of snags. Tomorrow, Ronin repeated, hands on knees and breathing heavily even with the suit. It was definitely true, talking while fighting was way harder than he thought. No wonder heroes always look like dipshits, who'd want to waste their time talking in a fight. Ya want. Me, Mao checked his digs, then looked down at Ronin, a mix of perplexed and amused. To come to UA, the hero capital of Musufudu. Musudafu. Come to Mustard Tofu, fuck you, and help teach a bunch of little shits. Mao sized Ronin up like he was crazy, a truly absurd idea with no founding. Yes, no, fuck. PFT, Mao snorted shaking his head. Man, you must have backquote hit ya head too many times. A villain head in backquote dear. I think ya stupid enough as is, now ya asking backquote me to tag along. You'd be a vigilante heading in, Ronin started. Still illegal. Still illegal, Ronin agreed, nodding. This was true, but you would have been invited. Vigilantes have been invited before, for example. Ronin gestured to himself while Mao laughed again, not buying it, but Ronin wasn't done selling it. All I need you to do is beat the shit out of some kids, it'll be like a day in the park. We go in, you fight 3 or 4 kids, then we bounce and go hit the streets. If UA tries any shit, I'll be there right with you to kick their asses. Yeah, da drunk's got my back, luck tilde me. Mao shook his head in amazement, starting to pick up his things. Ya know, that sheet might be comforting if you still had that stupid ass magic sword that then backquote was broken as sheet. Wha backquote da fuck ya do with it? It exploded, remember. Yee, don backquote give a sheet. I know ya still have it, I was in charge o backquote given backquote that sheet back to ya. Wha backquote, does half a sword on the backquote make half a portal? Da fuck, Zhu backquote reuse or reforge or something backquote da damn thing. First off, I still have a stupid ass magic sword. Muramasa. Ronin defended himself as lamely as possible, barely getting the main man to raise a single eyebrow. Secondly, yes, I still have Yamato parts, but it's bent and broken and so what? Fixed da damn thin backquote, man. It's a magic fucking backquote sword. Mao shook his head, focusing on the issue as he saw it. Explaining it was going to be a little hard, so Ronin tried to organize his thoughts. Quote. Let's go on a quick detour, just for a minute. Ronin joined Mao, rummaging through his bag of spare things to pull out Cupid. He took a few steps back, picking the wall of a nearby shed as his target, then lined it up. He raised both hands, steadied his shoulders, held his breath and fired once, still going left of where he was aiming, but even he couldn't miss the broadside of a barn. There was a quiet bang as a blast of air was fired out, completely unnoticeable until it impacted the wall not even a second later. He glanced over at Mao, gesturing. See that? Yashidi form or Yashidi gun. Revolvers are cooler. Yeah, perfect. His point made, Ronin pressed on. Ronin set down Cupid and pulled out Muramasa still sheathed, then attached it to his hip. He lined up the shot, adjusted his stance, then slid a magazine into the gun sheath before dropping low and preparing. With a loud bang, the gun sheath fired, launching his sword out with explosive results. This was a technique that had barely rusted with time, and in fact, was more useful with Muramasa than it had been with Yamato, instantly giving the sword enough energy to use its own quick launching red blade of energized wind to impact the side of the shed. Ronin spun his sword flashily before sheathing it, then turned to Mao. Alright, how about that? Did you see that? Yee, your sword can shoot lasers. What even backquote? Other one was cooler, caused that one actually cut sheet. Mao did at least notice Ronin's point, even if he didn't pick up on it, so Ronin decided now was a perfect opportunity to explain it a little more. Yeah, but you saw the energy attack. Ronin began untying the sheath off his hip as he went over the details. The guns in Muramasa use the same quirk from the same original chunk of metal. In theory, they should work the exact same way. Yee, day shoot, I get it. Boo tilde, Ronin tried leading him on, but when Mao wasn't biting, he held up Cupid and fired again. Again, a crisp trigger pull, a quiet bang, and a sudden impact as the energized air hit the wall. You can't see the gunshots. Oh, but I could. Mao pointed at Ronin, then at the sword, then at the gun in Ronin's hand. But, I can see the sword things. Exactly. Ronin pointed at Mao, nodding along, and explained what he thought happened. You see, kindness and Cupid were made in 1 made them straight out of possessed material. Muramasa was made as a byproduct of life, 3 things. First it was possessed material, then I forged it into the AEC, then I cut down the material in the AEC and made a shotgun, then I reforged the shotgun and spare material from kindness and Cupid to make Muramasa. And somewhere along the way, Ronin trailed off, gesturing towards Muramasa. The quirk had a slight mutation. It weakened. Now, it turned some of the energy into visible light. Honestly, for 3 reforgings, that isn't terrible. Maybe I got lucky that the mutation is so weak. But, Yamato is a little more complicated than Muramasa. Muramasa has an energy-resistant quirk, which might be why he's mutated so little. Yamato on the other hand got caught in a point-blank explosion and forcible quirk activation that destroyed a small mountain. Ah, Mao nodded, understanding the scene a little better now. Quote. Yee, that is kind of sheet. It's really sheet. Ronin wholeheartedly agreed. I don't even want to touch Yamato until I get a chance to study this, but with all for one gone, I can't get more items to test. I don't know if it's just temperature, if it's intensity, if it's time, or fucking whatever. I don't have the spare items to waste fucking around testing this. My plan, though, is pretty simple. Ronin opened a Gatorade, leaning against the wall next to Mao. Before I finish up with all for one, I got a few more possessed materials for future items. I've got stuff I want to make with all of them. But in theory, I can just sacrifice a few for experimenting, and once I'm confident and I've got all of the Yamato pieces, I'll try to reforge Yamato if I think it's possible. Do you think it's possible? Oh, totally, once I understand what's causing the mutation. Ronin nodded, generally optimistic about the prospects. Once I find the cause, I can work deliberately to avoid it. If it's the temperature going too high, that's fine. I did a pretty bad job managing temperature when I made the AEC, the shotgun, and Muramasa I just need to lock in, tighten the range, and not do it with so much variance by taking my time. If it's how long it's superheated, I just need to go faster, I can push the temperature more, then work more quickly and competently. If it's both, I just need more practice, and I'll try to do both, but that will be the hardest. Mao nodded, following most of it, and even noticed the problem in Ronin's plan, both of them. So, who's got the other shards of Yamato? Probably the police. I'm hoping with UA, I can get them back eventually. Even if it's in lockup or the Hero Association, it shouldn't be too much for you, they've done dumber before. And, how does any of that sheet stop you from Zhu backquote using backquote da broken sword da make portals? Midoriya faked a smile, then nodded. Quote. Ya Zhu backquote, ain't. Look, it's a little more complicated. Midoriya nodded along, trying to think how to phrase it. Quote. Well, it kind of isn't. Zhu backquote used that damn thing. I done backquote give a sheet if it snapped in 2 or 2 bajillion, that sheet is still off as fuck. It's a crutch. I need to get better without it. If I'm a come to UA, I don't give a fuck if I get in backquote better backquote. I won backquote yata have that broke backquote as fuck sword. Well fine, then I'll bring the damn sword. But I'm not using it on our raids. I don't want to break it more. Thank fuck. Mao shook his head, amazed. Seriously, dashi ya say. This isn't worth 2 rants in 10 minutes, Midoriya muttered, shaking his head as he finished off his drink, then glanced up at Mao. Also, 12:00 backwood clock. Sharp. Usual place. Mao looked at him, confused, so Midoriya elaborated a bit. I'll bring Yamato, so you better hold up your end and show up to kick those kids' asses tomorrow, Midoriya explained, trying to hide his smirk. Got it. Oh, you slimy little shit, Mao got a chuckle, shaking his head before ruffling Midoriya's hair. Give some punk an inch. Hey, you said it, not me. Midoriya got a genuine laugh as he kicked off the wall, grabbing his and Mao's things and heading for the bike. Now, they could plan the last few things when they met up at the usual spot tomorrow, and just ride it out from there. With only one day to go and a fix to finally help demonstrate fighting a bigger opponent, it all felt like smooth sailing, which is when Ronin should have learned was the best time to batten down the hatches. From putt-putt to home was just a hop, skip, and a jump, especially after the not-so-serious sparring they'd been doing today. He was a bit earlier than usual after some intense training, but checking his phone, he had a missed call from his mom. Only one, so it couldn't have been that important. Besides, he only missed it by an hour. The door was unlocked, saving Midoriya the trouble of futzing around with a key. He walked into the apartment, smiling as he kicked off his shoes. Mom, I'm home. Izuku, there you are. You're late. He heard his mom's voice calling from further in as he approached, leaving the entrance hall to see the ending of a dinner, something that didn't bother him too much. So he was late for dinner. He'd just take some leftovers, maybe a protein bar, and go to his room. They weren't alone yet. It took Izuku too long to realize it wasn't just him and his mom in their little apartment, with two people sitting on the couch. One waving at him, and the other actively ignoring him. He, little rascal, look who's all grown you what, Inko, did you forget to tell him we were coming over today? No, it just seems Izuku has his father's sense of timing, Inko huffed, pretending to be annoyed while shaking her head at Izuku. Well, we've already eaten, but I'll heat up some leftovers for you. Go sit next to your friend, and I'll get the food, alright. Quote. Yep. Izuku's mouth became a thin line as he crossed the apartment, dropping his bag off near his door and slowly moving step by step towards the living room, his expression barely hiding the strange tension he felt as he moved onto his couch, his thoughts backflitting through his memories. Did his mom tell him about this? Maybe something yesterday, when he'd been distracted by the alcohol. Even when he was sobered up, that alcohol was kicking his ass. With great resignation, Izuku sat himself on the couch next to Katsuki Bakugo, just a small ways down from Mitsuki Bakugo as his mother chatted animatedly from the kitchen. It was amazing, even when he didn't think he had plans, they all went horribly wrong. Chapter end notes. Yo ho ho, Merry Chrysler and a Happy New Year. I'm still a little iffy on the ending, but as this chapter was majorly originally, he used it with the AAC, but seeing as he never needed something that destructive, it had been repurposed when he was in his no quirks phase. It had worked similarly to the bodysuit, an external source of power, like a second set of muscles that wrapped over his body. It had taken him hours to figure out how to wrap them to help him instead of just get in his way. Perhaps he could try experimenting with them more later. Something to note. Yee, and you got another mask. And was the main man getting back quote. I'm sure you can request something if you do well. Just try to impress a furry football and he'll probably get you something good. There was a fine line between helping a friend out in business and venturing into enemy territory. Cross that line. But while Mao would be incredibly beneficial for the students, Revenant couldn't pin down anything Mao would like in return from UA. Luckily, the big guy had a brain, and Mao could figure that out himself. He'd better, Mao muttered as he continued to adjust his form, slowly getting shorter, becoming more pale, and then donning the clothes as he shrunk to fit into them one by one. Quote. What do you want? Backquote me. Backquote gain. Quote. Well, basically, beat the shit out of some kids. Mao looked over Midoriya, nodded his up and smiling slightly as he grabbed the Yakuza Hunter mask. Quote. Alright backquote, maybe UA, I'll get one freebie. The best part of coming to UA is that Mao felt like he fit the whole place was him size. If he'd come in his true form, it'd be practically perfect. The train ride over was pretty tame. Neither of them wore their masks, and seated next to other heroes taking the public transport, they fit right in. Sure, Mao was sizing up everyone inside and they even got asked to sign something by some kid who was just getting signatures from everyone in the metro, but that was part of the fun for Midoriya. It really came together though when the big man met the big gate. Walking up the sidewalk, Midoriya and Mao stared at UA's front entrance for a moment, just taking it all in. The overly large fence and gate, the overly fanciful and wide front area. Even now, Midoriya thought it was all too much, aka just like UA, at least they had their brand down. With a mock bow from Mao and a cheeky, after you Tilda, they went in. Ronin strutted in front, as casual as can be while Mao seemed shady as shit looking in every direction, sizing up all the students and ultimately getting distracted by the brickwork in the floor of all things. Nezu would be picking them up soon. Nezu never seemed to take long to get to the front when Ronin arrived, either because Ronin was too predictable or because that fuzzball had some alert on him and a fast way to the front. Until then, Ronin went over the basics one last time, gently pushing Mao out of the way of a few passing students who were staring in at the mountain of muscle walking through their gate. Unlike the seemingly old man, Mao radiated something that drew your eye to him like a professional hero. Ronin could even hear whispers from the students as they pointed to the big guy, muttering something about Vlad King's relative. So, 3 rules. Don't try to break any limbs. If you do, it's fine. This place has a world-class doctor who can heal just about anything, but don't try to do it. Concussions are fine, apparently. No one seems to care about those except me, Midoriya said as he held the front door open for Mao, the pair stepping inside to the actual complex itself to wait in luxury AC while Nezu scampered from whatever corner he was hiding in. Try not to swear too much, alright? They're just kids, and this isn't a street fight, this is a school. Ain't you a kid? Shut up. Also, your style of talking is really distinct, so maybe don't talk so much. Lastly, do ya even have a third thin backquote? Not really, just saying 3 felt right. Great, cause I already backquote forgot a backquote first backquote too. Midoriya shook his head, but he was smiling even if he wouldn't admit it. Whatever, just don't do anything stupid, or else forget the students, I am gonna kick your ass. Got it, Tilda. By the way, what are we talking about? Who is this? Mao and Midoriya paused, then slowly turned to one side. Walking in on the scene was the one, the only, the furry fucker, wearing his usual smile as he made his entrance. Mao leaned over, speaking the most quiet Midoriya had ever heard as they stared at the fuzzy football who was trying to listen in. Quote. Ooh no, I think I really will let ya do all that talking backquote. Thanks. Now, Nezu had questions but he always had questions. The long ride to the gym might have solely been so Nezu could ask his questions, dutifully reminding the pair that they were his guests and that the least they could do is answer some of his questions. Tilda. Quote. This was a bit of a mess. It was a new dimension from Ronin and Nezu's mind games, a step removed, but nothing a little planning couldn't solve. Now Midoriya only had to remember all that planning he did. This is my partner. He's the one who rescued me after I got kidnapped from your summer camp, the thing you promised would be safe and secret. That defense was an oldie but a goodie, and one that seemed like it would work for forever. The press might have moved on and the masses forgotten, but Midoriya had no plans of letting go of the clusterfuck that was the UA summer camp, especially as such a good shield. It might have been one of UA's worst moments in recent years, especially as it led into UA's worst moment in a decade, but now that it had passed, it had been an overall well time for the vigilante. Ah, yes, I'd be delighted to hear more about that sometime. It seems like an interesting web you got caught in, although by our fault I'm afraid. Nezu accepted fault, but his curious nature didn't let that deter him. After all, that supposed kidnapping was by UA's apparent nemesis, and with Alpha One still at large, it looked like Nezu was more eager than polite to get answers. Oh, who was he kidding? Nezu was always more eager than polite. Perhaps some other time when we're not focusing on trying to teach your students, no less. As long as he kept up a firm defense, redirecting to the main point, Ronin was sure Nezu's questions wouldn't lead anywhere. The problem was the newer side of the issue. Principal Nezu sat on Ronin's lap as they were driven around UA campus in a high-tech golf cart, but sitting next to them and getting side-eyed by a very enthusiastic Nezu was the main man, who Midoriya didn't know how well he'd be doing. All the time Midoriya saw Mao, after all, the big guy was loud, proud, enthusiastic, and hyped. But for now, while Ronin dealt with Nezu as best he could, the main man sat quietly, taking in the scenery as they were driven along. Mao's costume was his own finely finished version of the Yakuza Hunter outfit. Poofy pants for good leg motion range were tucked into what looked like custom combat boots, both brought by Mao. His chest and shoulders were wrapped in the proto-capture scarf, still with some red stains that Mao thought looked cool. His torso and legs were also partially covered by a long sleeveless jacket made of metal muscle, with a design similar to Ronin's coat to link them together. Lastly, at Mao's insistence, he wore a red bandana over his eyes, completing their matching look. Unfortunately for Nezu, Midoriya was more familiar with Yue than ever, so he caught the furry fucker trying to take detours to make the ride take longer. In the end, Ronin had cooked up his basic blanket statement Mao was Ronin's partner. They had been together for a while. Mao had a different fighting style to Ronin, and that Mao probably had a name, with even Ronin not knowing what exactly to call Mao in front of Nezu. Maybe just the main man. It was, technically, a very vague statement, even if Mao said it a lot. If they had police records of any time they captured Mao, they might have it on file, but it was likely Mao would slip up and say it himself. Therefore, it was the safest bet to start with, although this really was something Midoriya should have thought of beforehand when he was planning all this. So the two of you will be dividing and conquering to teach the students today. Nezu repeated, stroking where his chin would be if the furball had one. He turned to Mao, smiling, but seeming far less friendly as he tried to directly force words out of the big guy. I know I can trust Ronin, I've seen you in action. I've worked with you before. But you. There has to be a first time for everything, furball, and he's the best help these students are going to get. Ronin snorted, shaking his head at Nezu's posturing. It was clear by word and tone that Nezu didn't fear an unaccounted for stranger in the midst of his students, despite that being the biggest threat. Perhaps he was confident in his students, their teacher Eraserhead and Cementos. Oh, and Midnight, who was actually really good at subduing enemies. And, All Might alright, maybe Nezu's head was on straight for once. Better to lean off that point and onto a point Ronin and Mao were strong on. Besides, if you don't want him here, he can always leave. We're here to help you. Well, I know Tilda. I don't want your work to go to waste. Nezu backed off a bit, seeming to want this to play out a bit more than he thought through the safety. It was his weakness. Principal Nezu was too curious, and that was why Ronin was sure this would work. He just needed to keep pushing, and once Mao got into motion, this gig was as good as done. I know you're good, Ronin, but I wish we could see your partner in action first. Quote ... HMH. It was a small sound, but it was the first sound Mao had made since agreeing to shut up, a small noise of confirmation and nod. His face switched from neutrality to slight excitement as he looked down at Nezu slightly, as if agreeing with him. Quote ... You, agree. Ronin looked at him confused while Nezu sensed the turning tide, hopping up and almost falling off the back of the speeding cart. Oh, you want to as well. That's lovely, Tilda. We can just cut by one of the spare training halls quickly, should only take 10 minutes you say. Driver. Bang. Quote ... HNRGH. Mao cut Nezu off with a slam of his fist, driving his arm between Nezu and the driver to physically cut off him off, shaking his head. Thank God he was disagreeing to Nezu's bullshit and here Ronin thought Mao was going to do something stupid. But, I thought you wanted to be exam to show off. Nezu corrected himself a bit too late, looking between Mao and Ronin. Didn't he say he wanted to show off? He didn't say anything, at least, not a single real word. Well, he implied it. Huffed Nezu, crossing his arms and pouting like a disappointed toddler. And I thought you wanted to have some fun. HMH. Mao instantly nodded, agreeing again with Nezu. What was this fucker doing? They had a plan. He then finally uncrossed his arms, pointing one of them straight at Ronin. Quote ... You want to have some fun with? Ronin stared up at him, his expression shifting from disbelief to disappointment. I should have seen this coming. HMH. Mao chuckled as he nodded, retaking his stoic position with a stronger trace of his usual enthusiasm. Ooh, Tilda. Nezu handled it exactly how Ronin figured he would, getting even more excited and not bothering to hide it. While the furball mentally prepared for the show, Ronin settled into the chair to relax while he still had the chance. He had a feeling he would be dead tired well before the day was over, and technically, it was all his fault. Ronin held the door to the gym open for his two problem children, then slammed it shut behind himself as he strutted in. He didn't even bother going to the main gym, skipping straight to their usual side gym. Everything was as usual as Cement City, a whiteboard with a schedule marked off to one side, and an annoying rat looking over his shoulder, but this time accompanied by a big, stupid bear that he invited himself. What irony. Well, let's get started. The students will be here soon, and I brought you here to help, not waste time. Ronin wore his emotions on his sleeve. Guarding his emotions wasn't his strong suit, he just put on a tough facade and treated everything as an annoyance. That meant his weak point was real annoyances, they could always get a reaction out of him. Oh, this isn't a waste of time at all, Tilda. Isn't it proper for the teachers to be prepared and ready? One such annoying thing moved about like the rat he resembled, scurrying around while turning on sets of screens. The screens displayed a view of the city, presumably how the students and teachers who weren't in the pseudo-city could see the action during training. I'm sure you could use for a warm-up yourself before the action really starts, right Ronin? HMH, Mao said with a nod, still carrying his bag of things like how Ronin carried his. He walked to the lip of the imposter city with Ronin, building distance between them and the rat, then leaned down to talk to Ronin and give some actual answers. So, Ronin instinctively kicked the giant in the shin to vent some of his frustrations and was surprised as Mao let out a small grunt of pain. The giant shook his leg, glancing over at Nezu as if checking to see if the coast was clear, then leaning down again to finish his thoughts. First AFF Fakya. Second AFF, dis you a place has like a miracle Dr. Ya said. Man, fact them kids. Dis a great time for a stop backquote some train and backquote. Mao gestured between the two of them, focusing mostly on his issues but not seeing the larger issue. We can train later hell, if you want, we can just stay here a little later and fuck around. The students do it all the time, I've even done it a couple of times. Ronin shook his head, annoyed, and why are you shaking your leg? Are you trying to misguide what your quirk is? Acting like a simple kick to the shin hurt, it didn't matter that the Beowulf boots were steel-toed, Mao could shrug off bullets with enough hype. Ronin had asked Mao for help because Mao's defensive quirk was so strong, being practically invincible as long as he had. Midoriya stared at Mao as he realized it wasn't Mao, but himself who couldn't see the larger issue. He spared Nezu a quick and very obvious glance, shooing the little rat away and then suddenly moving towards Mao while talking in a fierce whisper. The fuck? You're not hyped. Your entire style is being hyped. How the fuck are you not hyped? Shish. Mao smacked Ronin gently, shaking his head. Now I know this is a new experience to ya genius, but quirks ain't perfect. If I was in Namu 24/7, I'd never need to catch these. But this is UA. This is fucking UA. And those students are some of the best hero candidates in Japan. How the fuck are you not hyped? Nerves. Bore and backquote ride. Seen it before. Look at don't matter. While backquote does matter is here's a very simple solution. You and backquote me do a practice round, get that blood flowing, then we go punch some kids. Mao moved in his own pace, which seemed to be slower than Midoriya's for once, but still right on track. Mao was right, of course he was. Hype was Mao's quirk, and with Mao's vague but probably long life, there was no way he would be unfamiliar with the intricacies of his own quirk. Not only strengths, but also weaknesses, such as put in situations without excitement leading to boredom or other strong emotions like the fear Midoriya used to beat Mao when they first met. Quote ... Yes, we'll do a practice match, me and you then, Revenant said aloud, his mind made up. This wasn't a detour to the best result like he thought, but the path did. It was his preconceived notions that were making this all worse. After all, Mao was hiding his identity. He could not announce his quirk, how it worked, and then ask for a warm-up. No, this was the best way forward. Or perhaps it was the path to the best way forward. Quote ... On the other hand, Ronin and Mao stopped to glare at the suddenly perked Nezu, whose attention peaked when Ronin outright agreed to the duel, then to each other. If you're up for it, we can kill two birds with one stone. We can get the students in here, they can see us fight a bit, and then some of them will definitely want to fight you, or at least train under you. Sound good? Mao went back to his usual responses, nodding and getting ready to stand up before he was pulled down once more by Ronin. Also, the fuck's your name gonna be? Class 1A all arrived at the training facility at once, driven over by a bus from the lunchroom. They exited the vehicle and entered the gymnasium with their usual air, excited, energetic, and passionate even if not entirely focused. Escorting the students were the teachers. They also took a bus to get here, and it wasn't as if they were going to sit in an empty gym waiting for the students for an hour. Besides, it saved gas if they all arrived at once. A cool million yen or 20 on robots, sure, but a little gas. Clearly not. Standing to one side as UA students and teachers arrived were Ronin, Mao, and Nezu, with Ronin pointing out each of the students they'd be dealing with as he saw them. He gave extra care to the ones he wanted not to focus on, specifically Sato, Kirishima, and Bakugo. I can go with them first, show off what they do, and then you can take them off my hands and do whatever, or you can just run in. Ronin cut himself off, him and Mao exchanging a look as Ronin realized the reality of the situation. Quote. Yeah, I realized it was dumb as I said it. HMH. Mao agreed, getting a laugh out of the furball they were ignoring, but Ronin focused less on his matters and more on the students. The teachers did a quick head count, organizing the students as best they could as they moved into the gym to set up. Ronin and Mao moved in from the side, visible but trying not to interrupt and giving Ronin time to point out each of the heroes, specifically focusing on Eraserhead and Smintoss, the two strongest here in his opinion. Eraserhead was busy with his notes, but Smintoss saw them coming and raised an eyebrow at Mao. Midnight, who Ronin hadn't focused that much on, just glared at them and huffed as she walked past. All Might was nowhere in sight, but he was a very busy man. He'd probably be late, if even. Nezu waited until Eraserhead wrapped up the head count to stand out, or rather, stand up on Ronin's shoulder to be visible to most. If I could have our lovely exam F students please report to the neighboring gym, we'll begin your training post-haste. Anyone who wishes to watch can follow if they'd like. Ronin huffed in annoyance at the thought of more people while Mao got a chuckle, the two exchanging a sidelong glance, then turning and heading to the next building with a trail of excited kids following close behind. Once they got to the new building in the pseudo-city inside, they stopped to address exam F. And it'd seem almost half of 1A. It took Ronin longer than he meant for to start, a little surprised, then to take his stance and begin the small speech he prepared. Good afternoon, everyone. The vigilante gave a little bow, then scanned the crowd, resting a hand on his sword subconsciously for a bit of comfort. This is the final day for training with me, as I won't be here over the weekend, so I wanted to address some problems we encountered throughout the week before I leave for good. Throughout this week, you've all been training for your provisional license exam in your own ways, and in some of my ways. However, I'm not perfect. Ronin gestured to his own frame, specifically, his rather lackluster size. While he'd gotten used to referring to the students as kids, it was when trying to stare them in the face and seeing he was shorter than almost all of them that reminded him that he was a kid too. There are entire fighting styles I can't use, or at least, use well. There are opponents that I can't simulate. Those, unfortunately though, are things I think you should train for. So I brought in some external help to allow us to train some of those situations. Everyone, I'd like you to meet my partner, Rue. Good afternoon, students. Right as Ronin was about to introduce Mao, something strange happened. Something Ronin wasn't sure he heard right happened. It is both an honor to be here in your school, and to meet you. I have heard much of both, but I am afraid I will try to push you to more. What was that something? Japanese. Perfect. Flawless. Japanese. Ronin's head turned almost mechanically in what could only be described as shock and horror as he stared up at the imposter who had replaced Mao while he wasn't looking smiling calmly, even giving a slight bow as he finished his introduction with correct formal Japanese. Ah, excuse my haste. I have not introduced myself. The mouse character gave a slight polite chuckle, matching and easily exceeding Ronin's old man vibes, then bowed more deeply with one hand over his chest and the other neatly tucked away behind his back. I have many names, Hunter, Guard Dog, but for today, you may call me Ruin. Chapter and notes. Yo, this is more the pace I hope to hit going forward. Finally had less overtime with new people being hired, still had to work on Saturdays but whatever my D&D keeps getting canned so more free time to work on this. This was a lot of jokes and stuff, but next chapter should be pretty much 99% fights, from the stuff with Mao and Midoriya to the students. My plan is to focus on Mao versus Midoriya, then step back and skim over the stuff with the students, only doing highlights of their training since we've already spent so much time with them but we haven't seen Ronin and Ruin fight recently. Not much else to say, so this is the part where I shut up and sign off. Thanks for stopping by, but I've got to stop stalling and start work on the next chapter. Thanks to y'all for reading this, Ebony Bird of Doom for editing this, and my D&D group for falling through one more time so I could write this. Adios amigos. Chapter 234, 80. Chapter summary. 80%. What the hell is 80%? When do you know you're there? Chapter notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. A plan was more than an idea of what was going to happen. What Midoriya couldn't seem to grasp was that a plan wasn't just floor plans and weapon picks. Just knowing what the enemy could do wasn't enough, you had to think about what the enemy would do. What will these Yakuza do when an intruder bursts in on their turf in front of clients? Settle things peacefully. Go for their strongest power to show off. Something in the middle. You don't need to know everything, no need to get a psychic, just make some guesses and get to thinking. When you could get in the other guy's head, that was when the plan really started to come together. Mao and Midoriya stood side by side, with Mao smiling pleasantly. His tone was relatively light and friendly, just the thing the boss had taught him was great for openings. After all, a bodyguard needs to speak a little of the local language if he's going to be useful, even if he thought learning traditional Japanese down to writing was a waste. We are here to train, not speak. Now, before we start. Mao trailed off, trying to sound smart, but he had forgotten the word he was looking for. He knew the Japanese for this word, not brawl, not match. Ah, we shall do a demonstration. Mao finished with a bow to the students, but he wasn't looking at those small fries. He was only looking at his main man, Midoriya, and the man was looking in good form. That little punk was good, but he wasn't at his best when he was training. Was anyone? No threat, no risk, no push, no power. No, he'd seen that punk, and punks were best when they had dirt in their eyes and blood in their teeth. It was time to make him spit blood. He deliberately moved away from Ronin, moving towards the students briefly. Now, one of these fuckers was Kaminari, the one Ronin would never shut the fuck up about, but which one was he? Mao snapped, figuring it out. The one with a sword, obviously. Now, if he remembered correctly, that Kaminari kid had gone apeshit and nearly KO'd himself trying to beat Ronin. Now, was that funny or what? Ronin lecturing someone on pushing themselves too hard after that whole mess with the boss and fighting his prize Nomu with all might. Still, they were here to teach, so Tilda Mao strode over, bending down slightly to speak a bit more directly to the students, focusing specifically on Kaminari, but applying it to all of them. Now, watch closely please, we'll begin with a demonstration on what anger can really do in a fight, so don't blink Tilda. Ronin was pissed. Of course Mao could speak Japanese well. Why wouldn't he? Eiko spoke Japanese perfectly well. Literally every one of Mao's coworkers that Ronin had ever even heard of was Japanese, and on top of that, his boss was the greatest villain in the world, like a real-life James Bond villain. Of course his henchmen could all speak formally, it's just Mao was fucking with him. It didn't even occur to Midoriya that the real reason he'd never heard Mao speak formal Japanese before was that he always met Mao in the big man's off time when he wasn't working. He'd gotten himself in such a rut he couldn't think otherwise. He'd have to end his current line of thinking and backtrack out, and right now, he was in too deep just where Mao wanted him. Ronin moved to the center of the faux city, his frustrations feeding into his anger as he prepared for the warm-up match with growing annoyance. Mao was taking him for a fool. It was ridiculous. Sure, it wasn't that big a deal, but it was pretty damn annoying. His foot tapped impatiently as Mao seemed to lumber in place, having somehow fallen behind in the short walk to the center of the cement city. Are you ready or what? This was your idea, Ruin. And why on earth is that what you chose for your name? I needed a name, and backquote I came up WI backquote 1. Was IH backquote mono backquote. Mao had already switched back to his usual accent, laughing it off and pushing more of Midoriya's buttons as he slowly got into position. Alright, he was definitely lumbering. This motherfucker was going slow on purpose. Besides, this is a great opa backquote tunity. Don backquote missed off fours backquote for dot trees, bravo backquote. Mao gestured around with open arms, taking it in. Asita backquote ta backquote practice in backquote. People ta fight backquote. And most backquote of all, a medic ta backquote patch up and a backquote intro backquote s way backquote get backquote. Ya know what backquote that cheat means. The main man laughed as he slowly turned to face Ronin, cracking his neck with several slow, audible pops. No need to hold back, send tilde t tilde pi tilde der tilde. It was in this moment it all clicked for Ronin. The little ow, this practice match, the thing about Mao's hype. You lied. You motherfucker. You lied. You didn't need to hype up your quirk. You just wanted to take this opportunity to fight. Because I mentioned recovery girl. It all came together. Mao did want something from Nezu, and he was going to get it right now. He didn't want tech or money, he wanted the same damn thing he always wanted. A goddamn fight. You were interested in this ever since I mentioned you had a medic who could heal whatever we did so that we could fight each other at full power. Revenant snarled, finally figuring out he was being used, and he reacted as he always did when Nezu tried to use him. He lashed out. How? Dick. Ablay. Mao grinned wider as Midoriya let himself on with literally no work from Mao. Man just had to get the ball rolling, and Midoriya's overthinking did the rest for him. Now, this was a plan. Midoriya thought he was lying about his hype. Good. Was he wrong? Who cared? This was going to be fucking badass. Mao didn't fully get Midoriya, but he could tell that Midoriya had some kind of snap line that went from alright at fighting to pretty good at fighting. It wasn't great, it seemed almost mechanical instead of the fluid switch Mao had, but it was there and that was what mattered. Now, all he had to do was push it, and the rest should come easy. Admit it. Ronin slammed his helmet on, then pointed a finger at Mao accusingly. His offhand gripped his katana hard, his entire body tensed. This was it. This was the line. That line about not being ready to train, needing a warm-up, it was all a lie. And this was the push. Mao leaned forward, smiling as he grabbed his own mask and slid it on, then raised a hand into position. Arm outstretched, four fingers curled, with the index extended. Then slowly curling, then slowly extending, inviting Ronin to close the distance and, why don't you find out, little cent tilde I tilde pi tilde da. You little shit. Boom. And there was the snap. They started with 20 feet between them, a wide distance for them, more than either could cover in a second without a running start normally. But it was like that big piece of shit said this wasn't normal. As he glared down Mao, Revenant did something he hadn't thought to risk since he installed it originally. He adjusted the voltage in the muscle suit. A slight tick up, activating more of the muscles in the suit. Instantly, Ronin's body was crushed with a sudden twitch, a pulse as the muscles reacted and squeezed him. This wasn't any armor, this was a python coiled around him, crushing every one of his limbs. But it was his python. To cover 20 feet in under a second would take a running start, but Ronin put his back to the sidewalk. He positioned his feet against its lip like a starting block, and when he snapped like a whip fast and fluid, exploding off the little ledge. The 20 feet disappeared in a flash. Mao and Ronin both moved at once, Ronin with his opening charge, and Mao with a snap kick. The main man lined it up with directly in front of himself, gauging the distance, then snapping it out at Ronin's chest to force the vigilante to build distance. Ronin couldn't just rush in, he had to respect Mao's range. Otherwise, one of those kicks would send him flying back with enough force to knock him on his ass, and then it was Mao's game. But there were more kinds of respect than just stopping dead or blocking. Ronin didn't even try to attack as he ran straight at Mao. He wasn't like Kaminari, he knew this kind of head-on rush would never work. He even predicted the counterattack and jumped to the side, then moved around Mao. In turn no, Mao predicted the counter to his counterattack. Ronin had seen these kicks before, he'd eaten them before. No way he'd be dumb enough to run into one so the little punk would dodge. And as Ronin circled around Mao, Mao turned 180 degrees and fired out a spinning back kick. Only to miss as Ronin instead kept circling around Mao, going further beyond Mao's back. You could see Mao's eyes widen as his prediction fell through, and his counterattack became just a regular attack and a miss one at that. Meanwhile, Ronin had a clear shot on his back. And you were damn right he'd take it. There was no flashy sword drawing, no shout of super moves, just a simple motion as Ronin moved around Mao before drawing a knife and literally stabbing him in the back. The cold steel of the knife easily punched through Mao's unhyped skin and muscle, drawing blood with a small spurt and the sound of metal hitting meat and bone as Mao took a knee. And that was the round. Midoriya hadn't calculated the plan exactly. He could tell he'd been baited, he wasn't that stupid. But the idea was so strange, why not go with it? Mao wanted to fight, whatever, they'd just make it fast. So what if he let his emotions get the best of him? He understood at least that he could push the muscle suit a little further than ever, but he hadn't been fully prepared for the consequences. His plan was simple: rush Mao, get behind him, poke him once with a knife, and then get the clown to start training seriously. The problem was the same one Kaminari had ran into, an ironic one Midoriya had completely missed. Because his full power would hurt himself, he never used it so he had no idea how strong it was. That's why Kaminari pushed too hard and missed every attack, and that's why Midoriya's dodge had been so weird. Mao had read Midoriya correctly, he should have had the vigilante dead to rights. Midoriya's plan really was to just move around Mao and attack him from behind, but something had happened. Midoriya's suit was a bit faster and stronger than expected, so instead of moving 180 degrees around Mao, he overshot, probably 240, maybe 250 degrees. The suit had put in just a bit too much force, which sort of played out, right until he actually stabbed Mao in the back. Quote ... What? Midoriya's head was spinning as he looked down at the knife in Mao's back, the knife he put there. The red of the knife, the red on his glove. You were being honest. You were being honest. He stared down at the knife, then at Mao in confusion, horror, and anger. Why the hell had Mao not said anything? He just stabbed Mao in the back with an actual goddamn knife. This was supposed to be safe, Mao was supposed to be nearly invincible, but if he was not hyped, this was dangerous. Very dangerous. Why did you say nothing? Hey, for his part, Mao just shook his head. He worked his shoulder blades, feeling the knife in him, and chuckling. Good stab. Shame it wasn't aimed at any vital organs, clearly just a wild stab. It'd take more than that to take him down. Was wrong. Scared of a little. Danga backquote. I didn't think you were actually unhyped. Not hyped. Whatever it's called. Midoriya's reaction was pretty justifiable for someone who'd only ever intentionally killed one person, and this definitely wasn't normal for a training session. We better call over recovery girl. Ya damn right, ya better, for when I'm through kicking backquote ya ass. Mao pushed off the ground, standing and grabbing the knife out of his back. There was a tug of resistance lodged in something. Oh well. Mao smirked as he tugged it clear, immediately feeling his body weaken as more blood splattered out on the street, then tossed it to the ground confidently. Ma Ruin, this is serious. This isn't the kind of stuff to take lightly. Backquote course this sheet serious. Mao laughed as he walked slowly, moving a bit away from Midoriya and then turning to face his student. And backquote it's your fault for now backquote talking backquote this seriously. Quote ... It's my fault. Glad ya admitted it. Mao shifted this way and Pathi's back cracking a bit as he felt the new nick in his ribs, his innards catching on the scarred bone, and his flesh giving up blood drop by drop. Damn, it hurt with every move, with every breath. It was a feeling Mao loved, because he hardly ever got to feel it. It was in this moment when he could feel the pain that Mao knew, even after all that had happened to him he was still alive. Ya thought ya could use a blade and not stab somebody backquote. Mao gestured to the knife between them, not annoyed, just hysterical at how stupid the idea was. Da fuck is ya sword serrated for? Da fuck ya got real bullets for? Ya lucky it's you me, ya coulda really hurt somebody. There were probably some words Midoriya should be saying, but he really didn't think this would happen. He couldn't have imagined that Mao was being honest with the quirk thing. It seemed exactly like the thing Mao would fuck with him about. But it was true. TCH, you're right. Revenant went for the blade, going to put it away, but suddenly Mao stepped in with a snap kick. Revenant had to respect it, jumping back to get out of the way and once again pushing himself a lot further back than he intended. Nah, ya done backquote get nothing backquote about nothing backquote. Mao's chuckles had grown louder as he slammed his foot down after the kick, standing taller and taller. Ya ain't backquote thinking backquote. Ya ju backquote going backquote with that flow. Mao gestured around them again, clearly enjoying himself despite his wound, a pretty serious wound to most, even now if he wasn't hyped. A few stabs. Done backquote give a fuck. Bleeding backquote out. Couldn't backquote give a shit. But not talking backquote a fight seriously. This is the one chance we got to go all out. Mao's voice didn't become formal, but his tone did become more serious. This was likely his real speaking voice after all. It had a good commanding edge to it now as the main man looked down at Midoriya, making his stance crystal clear. Ya can use sharp sheet. Ya can use dull sheet. But that moment ya decide to do that, ya gotta be all in, balls out. None of this half-ass sheet. I won backquote ja. I won backquote ja all. Mao's smile was so big that you could see it through the mouthpiece as he raised a fist, clenching it at just the idea of an all-out fight. And this is our chance to do it. Quote dot dot dot. Now Midoriya didn't know what to think. He shook his head at Mao, looking him over. Look, sure, we can fight pretty hard here, but that doesn't mean I can just chop you up. And you can't snap my neck. There's limits. Oh, Mao, for one, didn't seem too pissed as he crossed his arms, looking down at Midoriya. Go on Tilda. UA's healer isn't perfect, she can't fix dead. And she probably has other limits, too, so we shouldn't just go all out and hack each other to bits. Midoriya continued, trying to explain his feelings and thoughts, but even he could tell he wasn't the best at this. It was frustrating. But, strangely, Mao didn't seem to be getting mad. He nodded along, listening and thinking over Midoriya's points. Quote dot dot dot. So, what backquote should we do? Mao did that gesture again, opening his arms and pointing to the city around them. He must have really liked the faux city. Here we are, given that chance of a lifetime, and you don't want to use it to its fullest. What are ya, stupid? Maybe. Alright, you know what? Maybe I am. Midoriya was going for a counter-argument, but failing that, he agreed. But maybe I'm not. Maybe. Our fullest is more than this place's fullest. Mao stared at Midoriya, one eyebrow raised. He even took off the mask so Midoriya could see his doubtful expression before Midoriya continued. Quote dot dot dot. Look, this place is nice and all, but it can't heal everything we can do. So, we shouldn't do everything we can do. We don't have to pull our punches completely. We can definitely go a lot further than usual, but if we go all out this place won't be able to keep up. Midoriya took in the place as he spoke, trying to think it over before taking a deep breath and putting some thought into his words before he said them. Let's try for 80%. We try to fight at 80% and see how that goes. If it's too much, we pull back. If this place can handle more than that, we push up. How's that sound? Mao stared down at Midoriya, his smile growing wider and wider, as for the first time, he heard something he liked. Not a set of instructions that would definitely go wrong at the first turn, not something that fate could intervene in on. That sounds like a goddamn plan. What is happening? While the fight had started pretty interesting, Ronin seeming to disappear, then reappear behind Ruin and winning the match in just one move, what had followed was nothing but talking. I thought they were going to fight to show us a match. To show off. What happened to all that stuff about anger? I wouldn't take it so seriously, Principal Nezu. The one who was the most invested wasn't any of the students watching the screen, no. At this point almost all of them were watching their principal, who was thoroughly disappointed about the lack of action on screen. Of course, you're upset about people not getting hurt, muttered Recovery Girl, who so far was enjoying this as a break from her usual quarters. She had been sitting down, resting her cane across her lap, but now lifted it to give the principal a proper bonk on the noggin. You wanted them to do their thing, and they're doing it, so just hush up. Still, this really isn't what I had in mind, Kirishima said as he looked up at the screen. They could see from several angles the two figures as they stood, barely moving. I mean, what was that line about using anger for if they're just gonna stand there? Maybe he's saying not to use it at all. Mina shrugged, stretching. I mean, that's kind of a lame lesson though. There's probably a lesson we're just not picking up. Kaminari tried justifying a reason most agreed with. Ronin's always trying to teach lessons, so this is definitely one of them. I'm sure he'll explain it once he gets back. And maybe he can explain why it's so boring. Nezu grumbled, clearly unsatisfied. Hey, there they go, they're moving again. Zero sat in his chair backward, leaning it forward as he pointed on the screen, and sure enough, they had finally started to move. A nod, some hand motions, there they go. Maybe they'll bust out some moves, and then Ronin cut off Ruin's entire goddamn arm in one hit. Recovery Girl stared. Nezu stared. Everyone stared as the big man's arm gushed blood, yet he didn't back down. He ran up and began pummeling Ronin with the severed stump in his good hand, almost audibly laughing as he punted his own limb to the side. Quote dot dot dot. Who? I'ma get going. Recovery Girl muttered as she slid off her chair, beginning to hobble over while Nezu stood up on his chair, cheering. Yes. Heal ye Tilda. With Mao's hype building up, Ronin was capable of generating enough force to punch straight through, so he did. A clean early victory, before you can get your momentum. Ronin only had to grab Muramasa, lining up the shot, and then went in. Both fighters had just been standing there before going in for the kill, Mao rushing forward with an arm extended to grab and grapple Ronin, and Ronin countering with his gunshot quick draw. The serrated sword was fired out of the sheath at maximum force, actually helped by the muscle suit running at a higher percentage than normal, and steered directly into Mao's arm. The blade bit into Mao's rapidly hardening flesh, tearing through it violently before coming out the other side. Good try. Mao's arm was still attached, actually a few tendons in the skin held on, but not for long as Mao just kept on coming. With his grab thwarted, Mao steamrolled into Ronin, slamming his broken arm stump first into Ronin's face. But try and backquote ain't doing backquote. Blood immediately covered Ronin's face, blinding him. He was pushed back as Mao moved in for another attack. He couldn't see it, but he knew Mao would probably try to complete the grab with his other arm. If that grab landed, it'd be bad news, so he needed to disable both of Mao's arms. Even blinded, Ronin dodged Mao's next grapple by leaping to the side, not by jumping far out of reach, but by jumping into Mao's bad arm. Couldn't grapple without a hand, but he was too close to use his sword properly now, standing just to one side of Mao and he still couldn't see. Ronin swung his katana gently as Mao turned, feeling where the giant was. His gentle motion turned harsh as he stabbed, the blade piercing Mao once again in the midsection, and in turn, Mao finally grabbing Ronin with his good hand. Gotcha, bitch. He tried lifting Ronin to throw him, but while Ronin couldn't see, he could feel someone trying to lift him. All four Beowulf limbs activated, anchoring him in place into that sword, and as Mao tried to lift Ronin, he forced Muramasa to move, carving up his insides more. Blood dripped from his mouth, but he was smiling more finally. Ronin found a counter to being grabbed. Being a violent piece of shit. Ronin let go of Muramasa with one hand, running his hand down the length of the blade to Mao, then stabbed Mao's wound with his bare claws, sticking the talon fingers into Mao's innards and squeezing, trying to force Mao to give up with sheer pain. Come on, give in already. When the fun's just getting started. Mao shifted to pulling Ronin in, even at his own expense. He suddenly tugged Ronin towards him, forcing Muramasa deeper in even vomited blood, coating the inside of his mask, but never stopping his laughing as he began to headbutt Ronin. Never. Mao then began to shift, locking down Ronin's options. First, he grabbed the hand stuck inside him, pulling on it and regretting it immediately. Ronin just reactivated Beowulf and locked into Mao, forcing Mao to nearly pull out his own innards trying to dislodge him. Next, Mao lifted a leg and hooked Ronin's, forcing his weight down on the vigilante. Ronin struggled to hold up Mao, his legs locked in place if he wanted to keep Beowulf up, then went with it, putting all his muscle into not holding Mao up but holding Muramasa up. With a wet shoulder tilde, Muramasa completely ran Mao through, coming out the other end and leaving Mao a bloody mess. Quote. What in tarnation hell is happening? Mao's mauling was stopped by Recovery Girl finally arriving, looking over the scene like a battleground. Mao was currently trying to strangle Ronin with his intestines while Ronin was trying to get his sword out of Mao to carve him up into more chunks. Both glanced over at Recovery Girl, then switched from murdering each other to helping each other up. Good move with the blood I still can't see shit, Ronin led with, trying first to wipe his face with his metal gauntlets. Bad idea. Nearly scratched the lenses. Next he tried to wipe it on his sleeve, but his gauntlets went up to his forearm. She didn't have a piece of cloth to wipe his eyes. What a weird weak point, he probably never would have thought of that. But don't you think most people would stop fighting after being skewered? Maybe tilde, but that ain't Ma. Backwood person. Backwood black. Mao banged a hand against his chest, laughing before spitting more blood. He then turned and waved to Recovery Girl. Main man first, please. Recovery Girl just stared, then looked at all the blood on the ground, then at Mao again. How on earth are you conscious? Forget that, how are you alive? How much blood do you have in you? Not that much, right? Backwood now, so please, fix me up. Mao stood as confidently as a man with most his innards hanging out good, as if it didn't even faze him. Sure enough, even getting Recovery Girl's kiss didn't seem to faze him, despite how much energy it took to fix so much as a simple broken limb. Midoriya didn't even want to think about trying to reattach an arm. Mao's arm seemed to reattach just by Mao holding it in place while he got kissed, probably also using his shapeshifting or some other bullshit to mend the wound, cause he was stupid broken. Recovery Girl stared at his arm for a moment, thinking over what to say, then moved on to Ronin. Ronin just took off a glove and held up his hand as he sat down, taking deep breaths to brace for his turn. When he was kissed, he felt a burst of energy pass through his entire body, seeming to come and go with most of his energy along the way, likely mending all the bruises he was getting along with the dislocations Mao had done, like fucking up his shoulder again. Now you two, you shouldn't fight so hard, this is just training. Ye tilde to be's backwood train and backwood of my life. Yeah, a miracle worker, duh. Mao laughed as he flexed his arm, trying it out, then punched the two together, sound like two hammers colliding as his hype kicked even higher. That sudden rush strategy wouldn't work twice, damn it. Good call on da arm, but that cheat one, worked twice. I know. Ronin pushed up, grumbling about how he had already thought that, while Recovery Girl realized these two weren't going to take this any easier. HGGGH. If that doesn't work, then I'll invent something new to beat you. Yeah, always do tilde. They both took their positions, but now beneath their masks, they were smiling. After all, it wasn't every day you got to beat the shit out of your best friend. A close-range exchange of blows, highlighted by the moment Mao's hype grew enough to deflect sword blows, his arms creating small showers of sparks as he blocked Ronin's swings, only to get cocky and get stabbed in the eye while breaking Ronin's leg. A long-range chase with real bullets, ending when Mao reminded Ronin that he wasn't the only one carrying heat, and in fact, his accuracy was nothing compared to the main man shooting him directly in the face, the mask deflecting the bullet but breaking Ronin's nose, and his watering eyes fucking up his parkour just long enough Mao could catch him and throw him through a wall while Ronin left him a grenade. A high-speed fight in close quarters. Ronin jumped off the wall, shooting Mao constantly while circling around for an opening. He was a natural dancer, moving in and out of Mao's range with fluid steps coming just close enough to hit the big man and then fading back before he could be hit back. Firing 3 bullets, then bringing his arm up and diving to one side just as a sharp kick snapped past where his head had been. He didn't even hit the ground before he fired 2 more shots, hitting the ground and flipping past the next kick and slashing Mao's torso twice before the big man could even throw a counter punch and ending it with an air slash straight at Mao's now unguarded face. Mao ate every hit though, even headbutting the air slash. He grunted in exertion when a sharp piece of metal struck him. He grit his teeth as he blocked his vitals from gunfire. He flinched slightly when slamming his own head into an energy attack, but even if it was wearing him down, it wasn't breaking him down. He blocked those hits and ran in for more. Ronin might have been faster than ever, but Mao was bringing his A game too and he was not getting shaken so easily. Both were adjusting to the situation as it went. Usually Mao was the faster one, with more experience, a longer stride, and Ronin keeping up not by being fast, but by predicting what Mao would do next. By upping the power of the muscle suit, though, the script flipped. Ronin was now the faster of the two, at the cost of constantly being crushed, bruised, and beaten by his own armor, and damn did going this hard hurt. Just by going too hard and blocking a punch, Ronin dislocated his own shoulder and had to step back and shoulder check a wall to try slamming it back into place. On the flip side, Mao had far better control over himself. Being stabbed or shot, running or standing still, Mao kept himself exactly where he wanted, easily firing off a constant barrage of attacks and forcing Ronin to keep dodging. Forcing him to use the suit more. Forcing him to get crushed by the suit. Without even hitting Ronin, Mao was breaking Ronin down, forcing him to lose control by going faster than ever all while he stood steadfast. Mao broke the wall a second after Ronin moved out of the way, then grabbed a large chunk of rock and hurled it at Ronin, nailing him in the arm. In his own measure, Ronin might not have as good control over himself, but he had enough speed to correct. If Mao was a pyramid, easily staying upright, Ronin was atop his own speed allowing him to correct and adjust to stay up. The projectile was too fast approaching to avoid, coming at Ronin's center mass, so Ronin just did what he could, everything possible to lessen the impact but accidentally making it worse. He brought his arm up, trying to whack it out of the way with his enhanced strength while he dodged, but instead of knocking it aside like a thrown pillow, the massive chunk of rock hit his arm pushed as hard as it could, and it did, pushing so hard against the massive incoming force that with an audible pop and snap, his arm broke at the elbow. And still Mao came. Mao was never far behind, giving no quarter as he rushed right after the thrown debris to finish the fight with arms outstretched and his demon mask coated with his own blood. Ronin and Mao began their final exchange, Mao throwing singular strong attacks, so powerful they couldn't be deflected, and Ronin forcing himself to combine dodging and parrying to stay out of reach. Ronin wasn't blocking Mao's punches, he was pushing off Mao's arms to throw himself out of the way, just like he had against that female Nomu in Kamino Ward during Hell Night. Ronin didn't let up, though. With one hand on the katana and his other barely holding onto his pistol, he kept sneaking in attacks, small pokes and stabs, punctuated with gunfire to try and force an opening. He fired multiple charged shots with hardly a shred of accuracy, which Mao still respected enough to dodge after one put a hole in his shin. With the prospect of being healed after every fight, though, both were more willing than ever to risk it, and for Mao, that was saying something. To win, he wouldn't mind a few gunshots. He grit his teeth, counting down the gunshots until he was sure Ronin only had 1 bullet left. That wouldn't be enough to stop him. Ronin could count too. While Mao was slow, he was steady like an avalanche. He ate up everything Ronin had and kept advancing until he slowly pushed Ronin into a corner, with nowhere to go but into his waiting hands and only 1 bullet that Mao clearly had no intention of dodging. Pushing through the pain, ever advancing, finding the next challenge, this was Mao's 80%, not just a thrill seeker, but the man who had eaten 3 of All Might's 100% punches in a row and he'd accept no less. Like a caged animal, Ronin began to move more in place, bouncing from foot to foot as he dropped his pistol. He was reaching his 80%. He was tired, every healing drained him. He didn't have bullshit superpowers. He hadn't switched much through his weapons, most of them took too long. He'd thrown a couple knives, used his pistols, but the axe and spear took too long to get out, and now he was down an arm and out of most options. But he could still fight. Now, he one-handed Muramasa, preparing for the final exchange. Let's wrap this up. Damn straight. Mao planted his feet, breathing deeply. Both arms up, ready to deflect a sword blow. He thought he was going to deal with one last bullet, but now, he didn't have to. There was nothing left to respect, it was time to push in. Ronin's movements began to take a rhythm as he took his stance. Instead of pointing Muramasa directly at Mao and trying to counter-stab when he was rushed, he it. He finally settled into a crouched stance to push off the ground as his right wrapped tightly around Muramasa, but his other hand swung back with difficulty, missing the sheath entirely and going under his coat as it swung limply. Fuck. Both stood stock still for a moment before crashing into each other. Ironically, this was the most in sync they'd been, still not perfect, but understanding each other's power and how the other one threatened them. The dust and fog that permeated the building, the slightly collapsing walls, the small bits of rubble, it all seemed to fade out as they just focused on each other. The first move was explosive. Mao ran straight in, sprinting forward to build momentum before lashing out with a heavy kick easily enough to knock Ronin back into the corner where Mao would wail on him. It was likely Ronin would resist again, but pinned against a wall and beaten into it, there wouldn't be much. All he had to do was push through the gunfire quick draw, and with his level of hype, there was no way he'd lose a limb this time. So he ran in, and using his longer reach, lashed out unafraid of the gunfire quick draw. But it never came. Ronin's hand wasn't on the trigger after all, it was in his back pocket, fishing something out he couldn't do the gunfire quick draw right now. And why would he? He hadn't hit his 80% yet. This match was about pushing limits and doing things that might be dangerous, and there was one thing that Ronin wanted to stone, a thing he hadn't even touched in so long. So Ronin didn't dodge. So Ronin didn't block. So Ronin just stood there and smiled as Mao's kick came down, slowly sinking into the fog as it stuck to his boots, his pants painting them white with portals. Weeping demon style. You could see Mao's eyes widen as he realized what was about to happen, Ronin relaxing his body as he drew his second blade, his hand resting on the controls. Form 4. It was a little late to stop, so Mao pushed even harder, sprinting as fast as he could. Fuck kicking, he was just going to body slam Ronin. He needed to land a hit before that little shit fully got into the smoke, or else. Misty Mirage, into Weeping Demon style. Formless. Midoriya closed his eyes, stepping off solid ground and falling straight through his portal. The world there was completely bluish-white, seeming completely flat and stretching on for miles, with no horizon in sight. An arid chill, a complete dryness. The only sight was the real world peeking in through the fog of the cement city, the rebel, and his opponent. Izuku's first breath created a small cloud as he exhaled, then breathed in the extremely cold air, and finally, he stepped forward, slowly drawing both swords in one fluid motion. Slash dimension. Chapter end notes. Yo. I've been wanting to show a fight in the classic format, no holding back, just two people trying to murder each other. Then, the complications came because of that troublesome thing, these aren't just action figures, they're characters, and there's no way Midoriya would do that. So, it became two people trying to almost murder each other. The goal was both to tell an especially violent fight, to show what Midoriya could do if he wasn't so ethical as well as most people would hold up to him. There's a reason Ronin was thought to be a threat to All Might back in the day. It wasn't that he was super strong, it was that with his portals he was so fast he could speed blitz the number one hero and kill him before he was ready. It probably wouldn't have worked. Ronin's portals aren't his quirk, so his control over them is fairly limited, but the concept of it is scary. In addition to that, it only takes one knife to the back to kill most heroes since they don't wear body armor, and Ronin would be terrifying as a villain. It's also a chance to show off some of the skills and stuff we haven't touched on in forever. I can't remember the last chapter Ronin name dropped one of his moves, or he made any adjustments to the bodysuit as simple as trying to use it to enhance his strength a bite and then getting a chance to how that works with it crushing him a bit every time he moves. I would have incorporated more weapons, too, but Ronin realistically wouldn't be that good at switching between rapidly in a high-stakes fight as he has basically no practice at it. I think I might have him start doing that, as switching weapons mid-fight could be pretty cool if Devil May Cry has taught me anything. Mao, as always, can't show how cool he is in my opinion since his entire power can be boiled to. He gets hit, but he doesn't go down, and Ronin can't even hit that hard in the first place. Ronin's specialty isn't massive force, he's not a sledgehammer, so a reinforced wall like Mao can't shine as much when fighting him. That's why I didn't try to show his pure force resistance and went more for his pain resistance, especially early in the fight, and by trying to emphasize that while Ronin can be crazy fast, pack a lot of heat, and has a lot of tricks with his possessed items, Mao is just plain good. His defense is more solid than his quirk, he's more steadfast than the entire League of Losers, and he's reliable even though his quirk isn't always reliable. There's a reason Mao never uses his possessed item while Midoriya exclusively uses them to fight. All in all, that's it. Ironically, I didn't want this to stretch out too long because I felt it'd ruin the action. I wanted this portion to feel very violent, and I didn't want to normalize it, specifically with that first fight where Mao and Ronin are literally tearing each other apart, neither refusing to give up because they've never done this before and are so confident they're about to win that they keep going past where they probably should. To peel back the curtain, Ronin is an action story, can't have Midoriya getting hurt too much for one reason, safety nets, specifically the lack of them. On a large scale, it is the idea that the hero can't lose because the story will end. The goal is to create losses that don't end the story, having a hero get injured instead of die, the villain's plan going through but the heroes have more chances to stop it, that sort of thing. The main idea though is there's a sweet spot of threat level, a range of threats that a hero can and should deal with. Too little threat and it's impossible to lose, too much and it's impossible to win. Pretty simple. But Midoriya has more weaknesses. As a vigilante, he also has to worry about getting arrested if he ever gets knocked out, meaning he has to be conscious if he's about to lose and book it himself, giving up winning the current fight to make sure he even has a chance to have future fights. He has no medical team, so usually, if Midoriya gets hurt or breaks a limb, he's got to go to the hospital like a normal person and have it heal very slowly. Great for creating slower moments, not so much for high-octane action, and I find the best solution is to have Midoriya be aware of these problems. I'll try to do more with them in the future, but right now, I'm trying to show off by showing Midoriya when he's aware he doesn't have these limits pushing his body further than he usually would, making riskier attacks, that sort of thing. I'm hoping that you the reader will pick up on the difference between this and normal, and who knows. Only hindsight will tell if it worked. Shout out to the usual thanks to my editor, Ebony Bird of Doom, who hasn't edited this chapter yet but will soon, you for reading, and thanks to me for getting on my ass in front of a computer and writing this stuff. Adios. Chapter 235, Training's End. Chapter Summary. With the return of Yamato, the sparring matches between Mao and Ronin are brought to an end and the actual training that this was supposed to be about can happen. Chapter Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. An explosion of white and cold, a room once filled with smoke, dark and dim, lighting up with an unearthly light that cut through dimensions. A swordsman of unusual recklessness, a young man rising through the portals like a wraith to claim its haunt, two swords in his hands. A living Oni straight from mythology and twice as tough, laughing with complete euphoria as it finally got to the good sheet. Yes, yes, Mao roared as he moved toward Ronin's form, unconcerned with the portals around him. His eager expression behind the mask only grew as his opponent twitched to life, the two swords moving into a fighting form. Finally, some real action. Who? Ronin slowly took his stance, keeping the shorter Yamato pointed ahead at Mao while the longer Muramasa stayed slightly to the side, out of the way. The cold bit into him, filling his legs with a numbing sensation even through the bodysuit as the other dimension so ungodly cold ate away at any warmth it could find. But right now, it was perfect. The sting was helping keep his eyes open just a bit longer after all the healing recovery girl had used on him. Mao charged like a football linebacker, tackling and body slamming through where Ronin had been. The small figure stepped to one side, dodging slightly and taking a wild swing at Mao's back with Yamato. The heavenly broken blade made a slight hiss as it swung, generating a trail of smoke before impacting dully into the main man's back. Ronin TSKED, noting that he didn't use the sword right, he must have activated it wrong. He could tell because instead of being cut in half, Mao kicked off the wall and spin kicked Ronin in the face, launching the motherfucker like a soccer ball. Dash it back and back tickles. Mao roared, moving in for the follow-up as Ronin adjusted his grip and swung once as he flew, then disappeared into a portal. Ha, some sneaky sheet. Ronin teleported behind Mao, but he was still flying from Mao's kick. He crashed into the main man's back, the two bouncing off each other ineffectually back to back. Portals 5 meter minimum, Ronin muttered to himself as he and Mao spun, the two clashing as Muramasa met and blocked Mao's blind kick. Ronin was pushed into the ground by the sheer weight of Mao's kick, the larger man keeping his leg against Ronin's sword to try and force Ronin down for a moment before switching it up. From resting his leg against Ronin's guard, Mao bent at the knee and snap kicked at Ronin again, missing only as Ronin leaned further down, using its small height to his advantage and finishing with a counter blow from Yamato. A clean line, Ronin said as he rose off the ground, striking with Yamato at Mao's back leg. If Mao wanted to kick, how would he do it with only one leg to stand on? For a clean cut. The sword clearly activated this time, creating a white line as it sailed straight through Mao's pants at the thigh, but instead of cutting straight through Mao's leg, it impacted dully again. What? Yuck, work ain't cheat to me, mother backquote fucka backquote. Mao hopped from one leg to the other, his former back leg spiking up to knee Ronin in the chest, hitting Ronin's guard so hard that in spite of blocking, the vigilante still ate it, slamming his swords into his chest and flying a foot off the ground. And that's why. Ronin's arms shook with the impact, but he still put his swords up to try and guard, only to get grabbed instead, their heads quickly being slammed together before Mao threw Ronin straight into the ground. I'm domain, fucking man, baby tilde. Ronin at least activated Yamato before he hit the ground, teleporting from below Mao to above him and turning his fall into a dropkick. Ronin spun midair, lining up his feet, then slammed both boots straight into Mao's neck, getting the big guy to move back a few inches while Ronin spun backward, landing gracefully from all the parkour practice. You're hype. You're too hype for Yamato to affect you. Ronin couldn't help but speculate, it was in his nature. He still worked while he talked, firing 2 air slashes with Muramasa to try and harass Mao. What the hell? Yamato worked on you before. Wasn't as hype before, beach tilde. Mao laughed, eating the 2 red slashes to the face then being blindsided as Ronin had charged, using the slashes to block Mao's view of the real attack. Sorry, but you're gonna eat shit cause you're too excited tilde. We'll see. Ronin shot back, now using both swords at once to try attacking with clearly ineffective results. Muramasa, the serrated sword, couldn't pierce Mao's skin anymore, and Yamato had never even been sharp. On their own, it was pointless. Mao didn't respect the sword at all, charging him constantly now and letting both swords strike him, only focused on trying to get a grasp of the slippery snake. Ronin would teleport this way, swung both swords, then teleport that way and do it all over again. Good, good. This is what a fight should be. Mao couldn't help laughing as Ronin made another portal, only to be grabbed by the leg mid-escape and pulled into a kick. Gets the blood pumping backquote. I'm glad one of us is having fun DNH. Ronin tried blocking, but Mao easily manhandled him and twisted him so the block missed, kicking him again and keeping a firm grip on the vigilante. If he couldn't cut Mao to escape, then... Oh, ya know you'll love it. Mao firmly planted his back foot and pulled for one final kick to Ronin's face, but as he pulled, all he drew in was Ronin's leg as the vigilante turned his blade around and cut off his own leg. Quote dot dot dot. And that's why backquote I'm talking backquote about tilde. Ronin stumbled back, having just cut off his own leg below the knee to escape. It wasn't serious, he could reattach the leg as soon as Mao let go of it, but while it was the only way he could think of to escape, he wasn't quite sure how he'd fight without being able to stand. But that was what improvising was all about. Ronin didn't bother trying to stand, now using more portals and seeming to swim between dimensions. He moved through the foggy portals to the other side, coming out only to attack and prod at Mao until the main man punched one of his portals in two. As soon as Ronin went through the portal, Mao's arm seemed to cease to exist. He could tear apart the portals, but aha. You might be immune to Yamato, but you're immune to all of Yamato. Ronin realized with a start as he rolled on the ground near his leg, stopping near the limb and deactivating the smoke first to reattach his lost limb. That means... Yee, no sheet. Mao predicted what Ronin was going to do, who wouldn't want to get their leg back. And so he managed to catch Ronin with a wild kick to the arms. What, that cheat wasn't obvious. I cannot cut you with Yamato, but you cannot enter its portals either. Ronin did something that spooked Mao a bit. He dropped all those fancy moves as he flipped onto his feet, dropping both swords to his sides before slowly raising them together, each arm crossing over his body to form an X while the blades rested at his shoulders. And that means, this will work. Probably. Weeping Demon style, final form. Ronin shouted as he stepped through a portal, activating both swords at once, Muramasa's air cannon and Yamato's smoke and portal creating a mix of bright white smoke and red sparks as Mao barreled forward, trying to hit Ronin and unaware of exactly what Ronin said. Not his formless move, but a new one, a better one. Judgment cut. Both swords swung once, Yamato releasing a large wave of smoke and Muramasa blowing it all around the room while forcibly deactivating it. The floor, the walls, Mao's clothes, all of it was chopped as Muramasa and Yamato mingled with each other, Yamato's smoke erratically cutting through things as it lost and regained power, a surely lethal attack against most. But the main man wasn't most. Even in the face of the gale and portals, Mao stood strong, taking a second to stop dead, inspecting his shredded clothes, and laughing. The entire room was devastated from floor to ceiling, rubble dripping and dropping down onto the broken ground, but Mao stood tall with a cocky smile, brushing his chest off. Dat all you got? Gonna need something backquote a little. Heavier dan dat tilde. CRRR. With a loud crash drawing Mao's attention up, a few more bits of the ceiling dropped. Then, all of it dropped as the entire building collapsed right on top of Mao while Ronin quietly dipped out through one of his portals. Well, Ronin muttered as he stepped out his portal, now standing just outside the building with an amused smirk, still hearing Mao's confused and surprised shouts through the rubble. What do you know, I did enjoy that. Ain't that funny? Back before Ronin and Mao started to try digging the main man out, their fight was being watched step by step and scene by scene by a mix of several students and UA faculty, all increasingly pulled in their own various ways. This is so manly. Kirishima's reaction was obvious, amazed by both supposed heroes. Who was that guy? I thought I would have heard of him before, he's so cool. HSSSH. Mina couldn't help flinching at the sight specifically, at the moment Mao's arm was cut off. Well, he certainly is tough, even if he's not flashy OH shit. Their color commentary got interrupted as Mao used his dismembered arm to start beating the shit out of Ronin, the high-quality camera even able to track the flecks of blood coming from Mao's arm as he beat Ronin upside the head like it was nothing. So manly. So reckless. Recovery Girl had been wondering if that big man was a UA alumni, but this was beyond what even UA students did. We should stop the match, Nezu, that could be permanent if they go too far. Nezu. While the kids looked on in a mix of awe and horror, the on-the-ground heroes just stared in straight horror. Little bit of awe maybe, but mostly horror because who or what the fuck was this? Well, it was obvious. That's Yakuza Hunter. That's totally Yakuza Hunter, agreed Smintoster Racerhead, the two staring straight at the giant man. Was he growing larger as he fought? He didn't look that tall at first. Quote But why? Midnight stared up blearily at the camera, in a mix of disappointment and horror. Why? Why is he here? Why did Ronin bring him? Or? Why? Yay, thanks for the insights, Midnight. Nezu somewhat lurked into the background, not by not doing anything, but by becoming Principal Nezu for a moment to clearly think this through. A villain who's taken on multiple top 10 heroes and won, here, fighting Ronin. It seemed like defeating Yakuza Hunter could be as easy as denying him medical aid. He was missing an arm right now. On the other hand, Ronin had brought him in and seemed to trust him, more than he trusted Nezu at least. Offending one might offend the other, but was Yakuza Hunter's risk worth Ronin's reward? Nezu really liked Ronin. He wouldn't be doing all this if he didn't. Hard work for a cheap price, with no complaining about the work, just the interference. He did good work, was thorough, and had been very helpful before, but he had brought Yakuza Hunter into UA, and seemed to want to have Yakuza Hunter teach children. Yakuza Hunter. The man who beat the Shield Hero Crest and the Rabbit Hero Maruko into a hospital bed. Two top 10 heroes within an hour of each other. If it was by credit, then the Hunter's card was good. Anyone who could take on two of the top 10 heroes was overqualified to teach at UA. Unfortunately, there was this thing that Nezu had to consider sometimes called safety, and having someone who went out of his way to track down and beat down two top 10 heroes didn't quite fit well with that safety concept. Ronin clearly trusted Yakuza Hunter, and Nezu trusted Ronin, but could he trust Ronin's judgment? Was this bridge a stretch? Could you account on Ronin's judgment? No, Ronin wasn't part of the staff yet, so it had to count on Nezu's. And how did Nezu judge this circumstance, nay, this opportunity? Well, there was such a thing as having your cake and eating it too. Principal Nezu opened his phone, scrolling through his contacts, past number 1 Westabu, All Might, Tryhard, Endeavor, Cocksuckers Anonymous, the Hero Association, and even past his favorite contact, future Principal Ronin, all the way to the top, selecting All Might 2. Bridge RR ring tilde. Bridge RR ring tilde. Bridge, hello, Principal Nezu. Hello there, Lemillion. Say, do you happen to have a moment? As the fights ramped up in intensity, so too did the interest in the horrors 1A. All of it by this point had come to watch the brutal cage match the two vigilantes had willingly put themselves into and were loving every second of a fight that was single-handedly making some people question how far heroes really had to go. Thatathan Thane, Mineta voices the main screen switch cameras to get a better view of the action. They're treating Thief like ITH a deathmatch. How far are they gonna go? How far will we have to go? At this point, more and more people agreed with Mineta for once. A told people to go beyond, but this just seemed like senseless violence. Shut up, sidekick. On the other hand was Bakugo almost the only person who looked excited to watch this, drinking in every moment like he was dying of thirst. If you can't handle this, go back to the fuck off gym, all of you losers. I'm watching some real heroes fight. So this is the power of anger in a fight, Kaminari muttered to himself, who wasn't so much excited as he was invested. He was reflecting on a moment before the fight, when that big guy called Ruin had singled him out and told him to watch the match closely. Ronin must have told Ruin about Kaminari's crash out, and now, they were showing how they use their emotions in a fight and what a fight it was. Look at that pushing through the pain, giving 100%, refusing to give an inch. Bakugo and Kaminari were the most in sync they'd ever been, watching the same screen almost seeing the exact same thing. From the broken legs and gouged eyes to the headshots and grenade explosions, it was one hell of a match. And there was a lot to learn from it, too, if you could push through the horror of watching a man back from the dead shoot out another man's legs and curb stomp him, only to get reversed into that exact same curb. Sensei's faster, but the big guy is way tougher and it looks like Sensei's running out of options. Kaminari stroked his chin, trying to pick up any detail he could. Ronin dominated the earlier part of the fight, but slowly and steadily lost ground until suddenly regaining a chunk of it with an unexpected move. I guess cause the big guy's so tough, it's hard to actually hurt him. Even if the old man can hit that moving brick wall, he's not doing damage, Bakugo noted, contributing to Kaminari's analysis as he completed his own. But Gramps is still attacking even if it doesn't hurt badly, big guy still feels it, forcing some distance and letting the old bastard get some room to work with. Oh, shit. Another round of sounds came from the class as Ronin kicked off a wall and dropped onto Ruin, slashing wildly with his sword one-handed then tackling him to the floor and shanking the much larger opponent for a few seconds before the big man tried to roll over, forcing Ronin to backflip off and shoot him a couple times while building distance. And he can sneak in big attacks with all those weak ones. Kaminari actually pulled out his notebook, taking some notes on this, but it was Bakugo who made more use of that. His style already involved attacking as much as possible, so this kind of stuff was great for him to think about, not someone who attacked usually with one big attack. But who knew how he'd evolve from this experience? By the end of the match, the two pals walked side by side, Ronin grateful he won most of the matches, not just for his ego, but for his energy. He was supposed to teach today, and how was he supposed to do that if he could barely stand? Still, he got his ass kicked plenty of times, and in the final round he technically got hurt more than Mao just couldn't dig himself out from the rubble. In time, at least. 5 more minutes, I would've whooped your ass. In 5 more minutes, I would've dropped the entire gym on you. Yee, and I'd power through, then whoop your ass. Ya get it? Please. The two friends slowly walked back, going over their matches and what worked, specifically the portal stuff. It's good to have it again, Ronin said as he looked at his oldest vigilante pal, Yamato. A reminder of lost days. It's lighter, so it's a bit easier to use but it's smaller, and it makes smaller portals. I'm not sure I want to start using it again. But when I do, there's gonna be some weird adjusting. I'll say, y'all body checked me like 5 times, and y'all what tilde I too small for dad sheet work. Mao adjusted his mask, which was mostly intact even after the fight. Mao was almost back to his usual full height, and was so tall Judgment Cut had barely even hit his top while his pants were devastated. At least they had spares from all the prototypes Ronin had made. Ronin acknowledged that, but still lingered on the idea. With the bodysuit, I'm a lot heavier than normal and can tank the landing. If I can just get enough momentum, I think I can make that teleporting tackle a real move. Hey, maybe I could just smack you like a baseball. Mao nudged Ronin's shoulder, laughing. Dat she'd send you flying for sure. For some reason, I think I'd rather teleport than catapult around my fights, thanks. Ronin shook his head at Mao's antics but also added it to the back of his mind for future reference. Alright, we're coming back, so either pull out your fanciest Japanese or shut it. Yes, most honorable Ronin-sensei. Bam. Quote ... I think I like you better when I can make you flinch. Hey. As Ronin and Ruin finally reached the edge of the pseudo-city, Ronin looked over to see that even more people had shown up. Quickly, Midoriya gave a quick rundown on everyone he could see before they got too close. Alright, Stripper Lady is Midnight, the blonde skeleton is All Might. I know what All Might looks like. ... Hey, is the guy next to All Might his son? I didn't backquote know the old bastard had one. No, I think. Midoriya squinted to make sure they were looking at the same guy, noting the similarities for the first time himself. Mao was pointing to a tall, muscular, blonde young man with a very similar outfit to some of All Might's later designs: red cape, blue leggings, and a white top with the number 1 million on it in gold. That's an upcoming hero from UA. I think his name is Million. He's All Might's prototype slotted to be the next number 1 hero as soon as he graduates, replacing Endeavor almost instantly. Hey. While Midoriya cocked his head the other way, thinking more about the All Might's secret love child angle, Mao just stared at Million, purposely calming his heart rate to try and cut his own hype while reaching for the cigarette packet laced with trigger he kept on him in case of emergencies. All Might's prototype, What are the odds? Good afternoon, everyone. Midoriya put on the old man accent, which was incredibly easy cause right now he felt practically 50 years older, and like he hadn't slept for a single one of those years. I hope you all learned something from our match, but that's more to you and your individual styles. Mao glanced over the crowd, exchanging a few glances, then followed their gaze, to see, no one's listening back to They're all staring back at them screens. No, really, I didn't notice. Ronin rolled his eyes, seeing the same damn thing as Mao and clearing his throat as he got closer still with Mao. Ahem tilde. On the screen was the final footage of the fight. Unfortunately for everyone, since Cementos built the city in a minute, there were no cameras inside the building, so most of the fight was lost. Except the ending, of course. A blinding white flash led to widespread destruction as the building imploded, collapsing down with a loud thump, leaving nothing but rubble and the lone figure of Ronin as he portaled out of the havoc. An almost exact copy of the last moments of the UA summer camp, but now in 20K and recorded for prosperity. Damn, nice moves, Gramps. Bakugo gave Ronin a thumbs up paired with a sharp-toothed smile. His expectations completely surpassed. He'd never seen this attack before, but it looked awesome. Complete destruction ending in a complete victory. Yeah, that was awesome. Kaminari joined in, grateful for any chance to stop writing notes. He pointed at the frozen screen with a pen, cocking his head to further draw in Ronin's attention. That's your super move, right? The one you used at the summer camp. Huh, Gramps, I didn't see that shit. Why'd you hide that? Well, it happened after you got kidnapped, Bakugo. See. Alright, settle down, settle down. Ronin was surprised that everyone was so interested in his super move. Then again, he'd only shown them violence as his super move before, and his ultimate move first the slash dimension and now the more refined Judgment Cut was a massive step up in every way imaginable. Yes, what you saw on screen is my super move. Ronin directed his attention to the screen, slightly surprised at the sight he could only see the destruction from so close that it seemed far smaller, like standing too close to a forest to grasp its full size. It's a move I try not to use too often, though, because it is far too destructive for a normal fight. A hero tries to make the situation better, not worse, and destroying an entire building to beat one villain is usually too much. Even if it was, this move would likely kill my opponent too. Ronin prepared to give an age-old hero speech, one that aired almost every year with at least some heroes saying it to kids. Although quirks are extremely useful, they can also be extremely dangerous, so it's important. Pissed, Mao interrupted Ronin's speech with a slight kick to the leg, and shaking his head no. Ronin turned his attention back and saw that, once again, no one was listening. What a shocker. De prola backquote Alreda backquote heard it. Move on, genius. I'm moving. Ronin shook his head, trying to figure out how to actually get the class's attention. This wasn't usually this hard. What fascinated them so much about the screen. It was just a super move and it looked about on par with one of Bakugo's or Todoroki's. Maybe he'd ask later, but that's enough of that, we're here to train. Ronin raised his voice to draw more attention, and with that, Mao took his spot next to Ronin instead of behind him, smiling beneath his scarred mask. Anyone who wants to train with Ruin, come to him. Anyone who wants to train with me, come here. We'll organize who's training first once we get head counts of who's with who, one-on-one. Get moving. With all of 1A there, both Ronin and Ruin got people outside of their usual group. Ronin's first student was the copy kid who hadn't seen in so long he'd forgotten his name, then Todoroki, the son of the current #1 hero, and a taller girl who honestly looked a lot older than him under his disguise. In order, Ruin got Kirishima, Sato, Bakugo, that Todoroki kid double timing, and Kaminari, surprisingly all of which were also coming for Ronin's training, but to be honest, this was better than Ronin thought possible. He figured Kirishima and Sato would be the only ones interested in Mao, letting them get lots of time with him to learn all about being a defensive fighter, but they might get too tired with Mao's seemingly infinite energy. Alright, with the groups decided, Ruin will have longer sessions than me, so we'll need to plan it out so I hit your gaps. Ronin got straight into overthinking it, doing mental math while Mao looked over the students going with him. They didn't look too tough, literally. None of them had more than 5 visible scars. Hero. He could still remember the impact of the first punch straight into his gut. It had sent him so far he was flying for 12 whole seconds before crashing into a building. 4th heaviest hit he ever took. You really are the best hero I've met. I wish we could have met again sooner. Thank you for your kind words, All Might said, seeming to sense more intent behind it, but fuck subtlety. Yeah, I would have loved to fight you. All Might and most of the surrounding people paused at that, while Ronin just rolled his eyes. The strongest hero in Japan would have fighted a beat. Mao laughed, hands on his hips, then shook his head. Ah, well, too little, too late. Still, your last fight. Nice. Very nice. Good punch. Mao's Japanese failed him a bit as he tried to think up compliments, but he didn't care, giving All Might a thumbs up, and then finally turning his attention to the other person who was still a little stunned. Mirio Tagata. Quirk. Phasing through shit. A tall kid with a good smile. Simple eyes for a simple guy. Nice outfit, good muscles. His stance had been steady earlier, but now, he was rocking a little bit. Was this new guy getting a little antsy for a little guy like Mao? How cute, Tilda. And you. Good to meet you. He grabbed the new guy's hand, grasping it and giving it a firm shake. He could feel his hand grasp Mirio's even as his wedding ring phased through Mirio's hand. Mirio clearly using his quirk, probably unintentionally. Quirk activation was a common side effect of being surprised, even if the user wasn't fully aware of it. With this, Mao's work here was done. Hype could stop and reject Lemillion's phasing, just like the boss said it would. This little trip to UA was a resounding success. But no one had to know that. Besides, he could have a little more fun while he was in the neighborhood. I am Ruin. What's your name? I am the comedy hero, Lemillion. Good to meet you, too. Lemillion was clearly a little taken aback, but quick to adapt. There was a slight sensation as Lemillion's hand materialized, pushing out of Mao's wedding ring and proving Mao's theories useful information to pass on. He had good muscles, too. Not as naturally built as All Might either. They could expect a smaller growth in power between the 8th and 9th one for all hold then. I couldn't catch all of your fights, I'm afraid, but you sure did look amazing. A constant smile, no matter how hard it gets. Of course. His job done, Mao let go and relaxed, laughing confidently. You should always smile when you do something you enjoy. An open face for an open life. Mao could tell they were very different people, probably down to their DNA. They literally didn't even think the same way. But that was heroes for you. A bunch of delusional fools. Still, he'd happily beat them to death, laughing all the way. But that was just for him to know. I see, Lemillion said, nodding as he stroked his chin, clearly thinking it over but not quite getting it. Of course they were. How could Mao see eye to eye with someone looking in a different direction? He wasn't delusional like them. I think I get that. I think I smile the hardest when I'm saving people. Mao stared straight through Lemillion and All Might. They weren't here for small talk, they were here for him, and what better way to throw them off their game than to give him what they wanted. A good motto for a hero. I am excited to see how you do when you go pro. But, before that, Tilda. You're you a student, aren't you? Mao leaned forward a little conspiracy, drawing Lemillion and All Might in a bit before nodding to the pseudo-city behind him. If you're interested, I'm sure you can take one of my training spots. We've got plenty of time, and I'd love to go a round or two with you. If you're interested, of course. The subtle shift of expressions was immaculate. An exchange of glances from escaped experiment number 322 or whatever the fuck that rat called himself these days. The slight widening of All Might and Lemillion's eyes in surprise. They probably thought Lemillion and All Might would deter him from acting up, but who could resist when faced with such strong people? Mao's orders from the top were to study Lemillion in action, and now, instead of camping out some night guy's agency and trying to jump him or watching him tear apart a few Nomu, the opportunity came right to him. It was. Ruin, stop making problems. Mao's great machinations were cut off as the sword smacked him upside the head, ruining his fun. Ronin stared up at him in annoyance, shaking his head. We're here to train students. If you wanted to find fights, wait until we're done. Unless you want us to finish sparring right here and now. Just as Lemillion had been taken aback by Mao's surprise offer to fight, Mao was taken aback by Ronin's. Ronin should have been exhausted, and if he was willing to keep going, he definitely had some idea up his sleeves. No thanks. Bah. Mao acted like he was completely unbothered, laughing loudly. We can train while we fight. And you can start focusing anytime you'd like, moron. Ronin shook his head at Mao's antics, clearly unimpressed with Mao's logic. Remember, whatever you do to the kids, I'll do worse to you. Got it. Yes, yes. Mao waved away Ronin's concerns, vaguely aware of the surprised looks the kids were giving the pair. They were unlikely to have seen the side of Ronin before. Sucks to be them, they missed his best parts. Well, Lemillion, my offer still stands. Let me know if you're ever up for it. And with that, Mao walked away, only to be pulled back as Ronin tried explaining the timetable for the 4th time, then split up the group for real this time. All in all, it was a great day, good workout, got to see how Ronin was developing, monitor the next one for all guy, and he was gonna have a cookout tonight. Ribs. He wondered if he should invite Ronin. But if he did, he'd have to invite Kurogiri too. Fucking with Ronin was just too much fun. And what a fun day it had been. The training itself was fairly basic, just more experimenting in trials by fire and practice combat. For the first few trainings, Ronin purposely stayed near Mao to make sure he didn't go overboard until the pair gradually drifted apart by the end to truly train on their own. Midoriya's training with his repeat customers was nothing to write about, but at least his new students were interesting. The older-looking girl was Momo Yaoyorozu, whose quirk could create things out of her body fat. Midoriya was pretty sure he remembered her. She did something special when she got into UA, but he couldn't remember what. Their training had almost entirely been just talking, going over different weapons, and some basic concepts for using items in interesting ways. He even got a fresh stack of smoke grenades and flashbangs from her, making this probably the most productive training he'd done in terms of gains. The other new student was Shoto Todoroki. It was a fairly boring match, with Todoroki just using his quirk in large powerful bursts to start. There were plenty of ways to beat it, using Muramasa's air cannon to absorb a big blast and hit him back with his own power's kinetic force, Yamato to teleport out of the way, or just use a bodysuit to try breaking his way through the ice. To be a little more original, though, Ronin busted out one of his more obscure weapons Rita, the fire axe. He defended by moving out of the way, using his high mobility in the natural terrain to block direct attacks, then shoot back with blasts of fire, carving through Todoroki's ice with ease. As long as you only use half your quirk, you won't be able to beat me, Ronin explained at the end of their training. Not just attack with your fire. You fire your ice off too slowly. If you heated yourself up, you'd be able to attack more quickly with ice. Do you understand? Yes sir, Todoroki said with an icy expression, nodding as he stared at Ronin, having only gotten one good match in where he trapped Ronin in a dead end, only for it to be thwarted when Ronin melted some of Todoroki's attack and climbed it to escape before Todoroki noticed he missed. Quote. And you're still not going to use your fire, are you? Yes sir, Todoroki repeated, nodding, seeming to respect that Ronin at least realized it. Well, it's only advice after all, Ronin muttered to himself as they made their way back, having finished their training for the day. Alright, everyone, gather up. I'm going to go get Ruin and Bakugo before they break the whole gym. Mao's training had been much more interesting, a shame Midoriya hadn't been able to see most of it. He'd gotten a few snippets. Sato got to wrestle against a bigger opponent. Kirishima and Mao had been talking about something and then throwing hands at each other. And now, die. D-I-I-E. Yes. Y-E-S. Hoo boy. Midoriya made sure to keep some distance as he came onto the battlefield. After Todoroki and Bakugo had fought on both halves of the city against Midoriya and Mao, the city was only still there in video footage and memories. Everything had been reduced to rubble or covered in ice. Hey, you two, it's time to wrap it up. B-O-O-O-M tilde. Crack, crash tilde. B-O-O-O-M tilde. Quote. Yeah, I should have seen this coming. Ronin took a deep breath, drawing Muramasa, and slowly walking onto the scene. Bakugo and Mao were just straight up throwing hands constantly, Bakugo going for open hand strikes with his explosions packing some extra punch, and Mao pushing through all of it even as his clothes were on fire and throwing his own barrage right back. They were clearly in a good state of flow, but it was time to wrap things up. As Bakugo was tackled to the ground by Mao and placed both hands on Mao's face, starting to announce his final move, a sudden gale struck both on the side as air cannon impacted into them, then Mao got a little extra love with Ronin's sword slamming into the base of his skull to really get his attention. If you two are finished, class is wrapping up. Ronin swayed over the pair of a grown man about to beat a student into the street and a punk about to hit that grown man with enough explosives to send him into the next gym over with a surprisingly air of calm. He wasn't surprised that these two would take things too far. Here. He helped the pair up, then walked a bit ahead of them to let them talk to each other, taking the time to organize his thoughts until they reached the front of the gym. It was time to bring this whole mess to a close. By now, 1A was back in the main gym and the teachers had drifted apart to do their own things. They couldn't stand around staring at him and Mao all day, or else they'd be busy assigned to do some other work, no doubt. At that exact moment, though, things were starting to die down. After a week of hard training, everyone was starting to run low on energy, especially after such a big day as today. Ronin made sure to gather up Exam F for one last time, wanting to say a few things to each of them before they took the provisional license exam. He didn't even bat an eye as more of Class 1A lurked around, listening to his words. He was starting to get used to this. Alright, everyone, at this point, it's too late for big changes. With your provisional license exam right around the corner, there's no time to turn course. Ronin took his usual stance in front of everyone, one hand resting gently on his sheathed sword as he looked over everyone, hoping this advice was useful to someone. Right now, just fine-tune what you can do. You are in UA's hero course for a reason, so believe in yourselves. The work you've put in this last week will be what carries you through this hardship, and with how hard you've worked, you have nothing to fear. Nothing you're encountering should be at the level of the two of us, Ronin said, nodding his head towards Mao as the big man stepped next to Ronin. But you should still take this very seriously. To be blunt, we should have never lost to a single one of you, but we did. Because you exceeded our expectations. And others can exceed your expectations. Be weary, be ready, and be the best you can be. It will take you further than you think. Anything to add, Ruin? Glancing up at Mao, Ronin wondered if the big guy had any words to add. He had been a gang leader, so it was worth a shot. The big man glanced down, shrugged, and took a little step forward. Remember to fight. And then he stepped down. Ronin stared up at him, more than a little confused, but nodded anyway and moved on. And with that, it's been great seeing all of you, but it's time to go. Thank you for having us. Ronin and Ruin bowed, with Ruin doing an even better job than the very tired Ronin to his surprise, and then Ronin was surprised again as he was tackled by Exam F. Sensei, don't just disappear into thin air again. Yeah, Gramps, show up once in a while. Drop by. We've got dorms here at UA now, some come by on the weekend or something. Thank you for your help, Gigi. My, ribs tilde. Ronin learned the fun way that was something harder than trying to escape Mao's grappling, trying to escape a five-way hug. He looked to Mao for help, but the big man just smirked at him. This was probably revenge for smacking him with a sword. Just because he deserved it didn't mean he wanted it, though, damn it. Once the usual party had died down, the last students to approach were Bakugo and Kaminari, who seemed to have grown pretty close. Bakugo adjusted his gauntlets and Kaminari fiddled a bit with his sword, both a little unsure of something, but to no one's surprise Bakugo spoke up first. Old man, he pointed accusingly at Ronin and Mao. I'm gonna take what we did here and blow it the fuck up. The next time we fight, I'll crush you both, you got it. So look out for it. Oh, a challenge. Mao nodded, stroking his chin under the mask. Here to, old-timer tilde. Guess we gotta get even stronger too. You two are still trying to get stronger at your age. Kirishima said with his head cocked, amazed, probably thinking they were in their 60s. Of course, both responded immediately, with Mao laughing boisterously and Ronin answering much more seriously. I fight to push myself, why would I ever stop? I'm going all the way until I can go no more. Mao slammed a fist into his chest confidently, as if to show how tough he was even for his supposed age. Quote. With the rise of villains and the retirement of All Might, heroes need to be stronger than ever. Revenant spoke in a softer tone, his fingers beginning to play with his katana's handle. The fall of All Might was a tragedy, but some would say it exposed a core flaw in modern heroics, the problem of having too great of a central pillar. Revenant made sure to look at All Might to make the point clear, then direct his attention back. When All Might was an active hero, he single-handedly took down the crime rate by 20% in his first month. This was thought to be a short time blip, until by the end of the next month it had gone down by an additional 40%. This continued on and on, with the crime rate steadily dropping until it hit the rates we saw roughly 1 year ago. Ronin summed up most of the percentages, using the students' experiences of living in the world All Might shaped. But when All Might retired, crime didn't just start to rise, it began to return to its original rate. All Might didn't just stop crimes. He stopped crimes from ever happening. Just his mere presence deterred criminals, but with his retirement, Ronin sighed, thinking about just how many Yakuza he took down. Some days, it felt never-ending. Hero society wasn't stopping villains. All Might was stopping villains. And when that central pillar vanished, the villains stopped hiding. The world doesn't need a central pillar to hold up all heroism. It needs pillars, people who can help stop villainy and save the day, to make not a person, but a world that opposes evil. Ronin nodded mostly to himself, then looked at Kirishima. And I will make that world. I will make heroes, strong enough to stand together and stop the evils that rise up, no matter how tough, even if I have to be one myself. The idea of some quirkless punk being one of the greatest heroes in Japan, nay, the world, it was laughable. But to save people, to fight evil, he'd do it all, no matter how hard it was, because he should. Quote. Ronin-sensei. Ronin's gaze turned outward more, noticing that everyone was staring at him again, more than when he actually tried to give that first speech he planned. Leading the pack with confident expressions were the usual suspects Mina, Shiro, Sato, Kirishima, Bakugo, and his boy, Kaminari, the determined glint in his eye catching Ronin's gaze even through the blindfold. Quote. Come to the test grounds, Kaminari said, gripping his sword firmly. Come to the test grounds this weekend, and we'll show you. We'll show you that we can get stronger, too. We'll make you proud. The heroes stared at each other, their expressions serious, until the frogs broke into a soft smile. He reached out, grabbing Kaminari by the shoulder and, for the first time, returned his hug. You already have. Ronin gave a lot of hugs that day and got cried on a lot, surprisingly. How long ago was it, when he was the one crying constantly? 2 years. How far he'd come. Sorry sob Stilda, Mao chuckled as they walked out the gym, no real venom in his words. Look at backquote M. Got your own fan club already, I suppose so, Midoriya admitted, not bothering to fight the allegations. They seem to like you, too, in spite of your best efforts. Hey, they can't help it. Evra backquote Boda backquote loves me. Mao laughed, patting Ronin on the back, then stretching. Ya no, was Alright backquote. Preta backquote good. Yeah, another nod, the two starting to walk through the rows of gyms. Could have ended better, though my legs hurt like hell after all that fighting and running. I'd kill for another one of those guards, just to get us to the entrance, screamed Tilda. Nezu's pulling up right behind us, isn't he? Mao looked behind them, nodding, impressed by Midoriya's intuition. Yup. Me and my big mouth. Yoo-hoo, boy Tilda. Nezu waved as the two men slowly turned, sitting in the back of his stupid little golf cart while the robot driver honked the horn twice. Mao was trying not to laugh while Ronin was deciding whether he wanted to take the ride of shame with Nezu or keep walking. Unfortunately, he could only fight exhaustion so much. And so the pair got into the back of that goofy golf cart, adjusting to get comfortable. Midoriya melted into the corner, stretching his back and closing his eyes for just a minute's relief. Mao sat in the middle to avoid tipping the cart in either direction, wrapping his big arms around the headrests. Nezu couldn't stop moving now, too excited as always. What exciting matches. It's great to see you in top form again, I was worried you couldn't do that anymore. And you're quite the tough customer, Not many could go toe-to-toe with Bakugo for just 10 minutes. Thank you. Mao, being excitable himself, was also happy to go along with it, taking the brunt of the effort while Midoriya tried to regain even a scrap of energy for the rest of the day. It was great to be here. Many great fighters. They've trained well. That there are, and that they have. Nezu nodded, but there was clearly more going on. Midoriya wondered how long Nezu and Mao would talk in circles if he let them. And thanks to you, they've gotten just a touch better. Only if they listened, and who can tell the time. Mao was still laughing loudly, seeming fairly relaxed. So, you've got something else you want, Nezu? Ronin interrupted the interruption to his relaxing, peeling himself off the seat just enough to cast a knowing look towards the fluffy fuckhead. You're fishing for something, I can feel it. And that's why you're so much fun to be around. Can you always tell when something like this is happening? Yeah, it's my quirk. I've got a sixth sense that detects bullshit. So, to get down to it. Well, this was originally just for Ronin, but given your name and your reputation as a Yakuza hunter, I'm sure you might be interested too, Tilda. Nezu led them on with a slightly different smirk from his usual one, but it was hard to put a finger on what changed. Ronin's guess was excitement. Nezu felt a touch more excited than usual for some reason. Remember how you asked me for any incidents you could meddle with, Ronin? Just some stuff you could look into, maybe help the heroes with. Nezu's smile was smarmy at best, and he was definitely scheming as he leaned forward and dropped his voice to a harsh whisper. Well, what do you two know about the Shihasakai? Chapter and notes. Yo, I didn't expect the problem of this chapter to have so many moving parts, namely, so many important characters I wanted to linger on, but I couldn't, otherwise it'd balloon out forever. Some things had to be cut, mostly stuff from the students and teachers' paw that'll be in the next chapter. Other than that, Yamato, it's finally back, albeit briefly, and I will say it will be getting used more. Still not often, as Midoriya will tell Nezu in Mao next chapter, but it's making a comeback. The training exercises were mostly cut because I couldn't think of much interesting to do with them, at least on Midoriya's side, and I wanted to release this chapter sooner than later. I did want to put more moments between Kaminari and Midoriya in, but then in a moment of pure sleep deprivation since my Discord encouraged me to write even when I'm drop dead tired, I thought up a way worse idea, Kaminari and Mao, a scene that we'll get a flashback of next chapter. Truly, the scene everyone wanted. And that's about it. I'm getting more overtime than ever, with it looking like it's only going to get worse going forward, but I'll try to keep writing as much as I can. In the meantime, I hope you all have enjoyed this chapter. Shout out to my editor, Ebony Bird of Doom, for cleaning this up and even doing some rewrites personally, y'all for reading it, and both of you for giving me the motivation to keep going with this even when I'm tired. That's enough shoutouts, though, for now it's adios amigos. Chapter 236, The Calm Before the Storm, Provisional License Edition. Chapter Summary. With all that practice wrapped up, it's time for the exam that we've all been waiting for. That I was entirely going to skip over originally, buddy Tilda. Chapter notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. That's Yakuza Hunter. High strength, higher durability. That's definitely the Yakuza Hunter. It was during the warm-up match, when the students and teachers began to gather to study the scene through the cameras. Aizawa glared at the screen, pissed. Number 3 villain in Musudafu and Arshul, and he's not even trying to hide it. While students looked on in awe, the teachers had a much different view of the same scene, namely, a relatively high-ranked villain in their midst, and so casually too. The Yakuza Hunter, another rarely seen vigilante turned full-on villain when he attacked heroes and police. One could argue that it was a kind of self-defense, given that those heroes and officers had created a stakeout to lure him in and defeat him, but Nezu had better things to do than argue a point that would convince no one, especially a bunch of heroes. Tension was high as the teachers watched Yakuza Hunter. They couldn't just attack Yakuza Hunter mid-fight. Well, they totally could, and it would probably do their public image some good, but the problem was they weren't sure of something far more pathetic. If UA fought Yakuza Hunter, someone who took on 2 of the top 10 heroes back-to-back and over 40 people at once, would they even win? It would be a hard fight. Eraserhead could erase his quirk, of course, but between people like Midnight, Vlad King, and Snipe against a guy literally laughing off bullets, it was a high bar to clear just to beat him, and that was the problem. Just to beat him. Because, while they could probably take on Yakuza Hunter, could they take on the Hunter and Ronin? Ronin clearly trusted Yakuza Hunter. His speech was more casual with Hunter than it had ever been with Nezu, speaking to a shared history, and even fighting they seemed very in sync with each other. It wasn't a question of if they could take on Yakuza Hunter, because sure, the second Lemillion arrived, Nezu was confident UA would have him solidly beat, but if they should. Ronin had been a reliable worker, doing good work for UA and people in general. Was taking on the Yakuza Hunter worth severing ties with Ronin? And, more laughably, could they afford to? Back in the day, Ronin and his teleporting sword had been theorized to be an actual threat to All Might, weak and All Might, and mostly in an assassination perspective, but a threat nevertheless. This was proven when Ronin managed to help in the fight against a no-modified Nanashimura. Logic dictated that Ronin could never beat Lemillion. In a million years Lemillion was handpicked and trained to be one for all successor, with his quirk naturally complementing and accenting one for all super strength. He was impossible to hit, could bypass any defense, and was strong enough to level a few city blocks while holding back. But yet, the hardest part for Nezu versus Principal Nezu was the usual hardest part, trying to use something other than logic and numbers to plan. Naturally, he failed, and he knew it because by God, the logic and numbers were vague. How much could Ronin's assistance be valued at? How much could Yakuza Hunter's threat? Did you count the people he'd already saved? The ones he could in the future? What about the people he'd hurt? The ones he could in the future? This was a hero school, but how much emphasis was on hero? How much was school? How much did they focus on strictly following the law versus what was best for education, and then flipping that, how much emphasis was on hero and how much on school again, but it's different this time, he swore. How many risks could they take versus the safety of their students? Obviously, in the end, Nezu settled on standing back and letting things happen while putting in protective measures. Relatively, Ronin trusted and had trusted Yue with more, putting his entire life in Yue's hands, such as the 2 times he nearly died. Once in Yue's summer camp, again against all for one. If Nezu couldn't trust his judgment after that, he doubted he'd trust the boy ever. The teachers didn't like it, but they didn't have to. Reactions from nervous to clearly pissed were common, but it was the safest Nezu felt for everyone and as things went on, it felt more and more like the right play. Ronin's magic sword still worked. Yakuza Hunter could face tank dismemberment from a weapon that could probably one-shot All Might. The sheer brutality of these two fighting it all came together to paint a picture that, as Nezu and some of the teachers realized with morbid hilarity, Yue probably couldn't take Yakuza Hunter and Ronin in a fight, especially with one of them seeming downright excited to fight the very thing they brought to try and beat him. When you brought a gun to a fist fight and the other person put it in their mouth, you should get nervous, especially in a world where some people could eat bullets. On a more positive note away from that point, it was also a great idea because Yakuza Hunter was clearly cut from the same cloth as Ronin. Good but strange equipment courtesy of the mysterious R&D guild member pushed by ample technique, and backed by an extremely powerful quirk. Maybe Yakuza Hunter was the one who trained Ronin. Ronin was pretty young, Hunter seemed older, they had a lot of overlap, it was possible. Oh, did that mean Yakuza Hunter was the one who saved Ronin from One for All when Ronin got captured at the UA summer camp? Yeah, Ronin mentioned that on the ride down. That was great, cause Yakuza Hunter seemed way more talkative, and that information was very important. Nezu took a second to wheel himself back in. Yes, the information was very important and he'd love to talk more with the Yakuza Hunter if he got the chance, but this was not the time. It did paint Yakuza Hunter as someone Ronin trusted a lot, which was interesting, and did give Nezu a bit more trust in Hunter, but it wasn't the focal point right now. The training was. That training also painted a very interesting picture, as Ronin and Yakuza Hunter were very similar in other ways. Both took their training very seriously.